There it is. It says we're live. Excellent connection. For you. If you know the words, you can join into. DK. Donkey Kong, greatest character ever made with the greatest game series ever made. Debate over. Thanks for coming to the live stream. Performing for you. Yeah, exactly. I'm Joe. This is my YouTube channel that I haven't posted a video in like a month because I've been really busy. But I am working on one, just to let you know. It is going to be coming out at some point in the next few days. So there's that. Thank goodness. Yeah, don't mind me and my shitty uploading schedule. Goddamn right. A celebrity is amongst us, thank goodness. Amogus. Demonculus. Nah, you can keep it. I believe so. I wonder what it is. I am, absolutely. I was born ready. They kind of did that, remember, in Donkey Kong Land on the Game Boy? Big Ape City. The OG. Well, I mean, it opens with the original Donkey Kong, because it has the original arcade theme as the beginning, right before Cranky gets smacked down by the newer, cooler Kong. That's right. Oh, wait, hold on. 1 second. Apparently, I am the only person coming through and you guys are not coming through. And I don't know how that... I don't know. Apparently you guys aren't coming through my, No, they can hear me. I don't think they can hear you. Dude, that's fucking hilarious. The beginning of the stream was probably hilarious because it's just me babbling to my fucking self and everybody's like, what is happening? Oh my gosh, this is great. That's fucking hilarious. Dude, that's amazing. I have to figure out how to fix this. I mean, I'm just gonna turn it on. Hold on. Hold on. That's fucking great. Like a couple minutes.
Well, I would say something like apologies. I hope it could help, but unfortunately, we can't.
I don't know. I think it works now. I see you guys
right.
on my
Hello?
desktop audio.
I'm gonna.
All right, let me just go live for a second. Hello? Is this working? Can people hear us now? Oh, it is working. It is working. Sweet. We can hear us. Hooray. Let's go.
Thank goodness.
Hi everyone. Welcome. Well, we spent 7 minutes no one else can hear us, so it's something. Well, let me just do a re-intro real quick. I
refuse. I'm not introducing myself again.
Hi, I'm Level. Devin is here too. Say hi, Devin.
Hi, Devin.
We're here. We're admins / mods in the Don't Mind Joe Discord server, which you should join. What we're gonna be doing today is we're gonna be discussing all of the Donkey Kong Country games, and then one bonus game too, and going over talking which ones we like, which means things we like about those games, things we don't like about those games, and then we're gonna go and then debate at the very end which we think is the pinnacle of Donkey Kong Country. So that was just like 7 minutes wrapped up into like 20 seconds, but we're gonna start with the original Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong Country, excuse me. So 1994, it came out. Joe, when did you first play Donkey Kong Country?
A long time ago. I'm gonna date myself. This is a trap question. I played it when it came out.
Launch day. Oh no!
Oh no.
Oh no!
I, I played it. I mean,
Well.
to be fair, I was really young. Like I was super young, but I did play it when it came out.
Wow, I'm kind of impressed, not gonna lie.
I got it
Also,
on Christmas Day of the year that it released.
Yeah, you said this was
Wow.
released in 94?
94.
Correct.
94.
Dude,
Yeah.
don't mind Joe, more like don't mind Boomer.
I fuck. I My birth missed that launch by 8 years.
Oh my gosh.
I told you guys
Well-
I was older. Okay.
It's okay, Joe. It's okay.
It's all right. Yeah, no.
But yeah, so what was your first initial thoughts when you first played Donkey Kong Country? Was like, were you wowed by it? We were like, whoa, this is so different than like Super Mario World, or
Well, the
whatever
big,
games were out.
the big thing with that game is that obviously everybody totes how realistic the graphics looked, which I know it's hilarious to say that nowadays, like realistic, haha. But back then on the SNES, it was pretty realistic looking. Like we were pretty shocked. Now my mom always liked video games. She loves Donkey Kong, so she wanted to get that game as soon as it came out. So she was absolutely like floored. She loved it. And like it was pretty insane to see it. Like we've never seen anything like it at the time. So it was definitely good.
Yeah, I definitely get that. Like I remember, so gonna date myself here. My first experience with Donkey Kong Country, the original, was actually on Game Boy Advance. So I played the Game Boy Advance version, the remake, when I was a kid. I remember we got a bundle of it for Christmas one year. It came with a green Game Boy Advance SP, and then it came with Donkey Kong Country, in which I think we called it Monkey Kong for a second. I don't know why we called it
It's a better name than Donkey Kong.
That is true. Monkey Kong kind of sounds a little better, to be honest.
Monkey Kong.
Monkey Kong.
But I remember I played it a lot. I loved it. It was super hard. I remember what was it? Like I can't remember the name of it. It's like the level where you have to like get all those like fuel cans to like continue the platform to keep going. I can't remember the name of it.
Trick Track Trek.
Yes. I remember I got stuck on that level so much. And then I remember, like, for some reason thinking I was in a different world, and then doing the version where you don't have to collect the barrels, like the fuel. There was like a kind of like 2 worlds before, and I remember being super excited. I'm like, oh sweet, I found like a cheat code. You don't have to do it anymore. I'm like, oh wait, this is a different level entirely. I was it's kind of weird. But yeah, Donkey Kong Country, I kind of grew up with it. Like that was like I think it was like that and Super Mario World on the Game Boy Advance were like the 2 games I really grew up with. So like those were my introduction to like classic 2D platformers.
What about you,
Yes.
Devin?
Yeah,
I
what'd you-
suppose it's my turn. Well, I did have Super Mario, whatever the Super Mario World number was, Advance on the Game Boy Advance. We just never got around to Donkey Kong Country on there. Don't know why. So my first experience with it was on the Switch.
Oh really?
And-
On the Switch?
Yes, I got into the classics very recently. Not very recently. It's been years at this point, but I still, even in modern times, looked at those graphics and was impressed by them. Although I wouldn't say realistic is the word I would go with for them. Because, you look at them for the time, they were very realistic, but in the grand scheme of things, it's still a very stylized game. It's just got some advanced hardware behind it. Like the trees in Jungle Japes and all the jungle levels. They're very cartoony looking,
Mhm.
But yeah, no, specifically like the forest level, Endor there, with all the treetop villages and all that. That's what really impressed me the most. The parallax with all the forest, the depth is incredible on that. For a game that's however many years old at this point.
It's a beautiful
Right.
game.
It
Yeah,
is a good game.
For me, like the original Donkey Kong Country, really, I've always said this. It's not my favorite of the games, and that's no spoiler. That's just for me. It's like it's always like out of all of them, it's been pretty much the most basic. It's not a bad thing. It's just like the way I've done. But like, man, like the backgrounds, like the underwater levels, the music's gonna be a huge topic because like the music is what really drives sometimes my favorite Donkey Kong Country game in general is some of the music, but like aquatic ambiance, love the bonus room theme. Like Jungle Japes is a classic. Even like Gangplank Galleon, like that song had me hyped as a kid. Like I remember like getting to King K. Rool and being super excited and like really wanting to like beat him, and then suddenly I was like, oh, this is like a pirate theme, okay, and then suddenly it just goes hard, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Like that's really what like kind of stuck with the series was like, just how diverse the music was and how it really blended well with all the backgrounds. And I don't know. I was a weird kid. I was the kid who was like, who'd always look at like video game backgrounds and be like, what would it be like to live there? Like, what would you went to the background? What would that be like?
I absolutely understand what you're talking about. And I think across the entire series, there is it's criminal that isn't pointed out more. The backgrounds in this series are some of the best in all of video games.
Yeah.
They look like you could get lost in them for hours.
Yeah, like 2 and 3 have I think more of the backgrounds I'm enjoying, and even like maybe in like Returns and Tropical Freeze have some really good ones too. But like I don't know, 1 just started that pattern of having really breathtaking backgrounds, and it's like something that I think is definitely underrated, and why for me I just really really enjoy the series and why I can still play it like to these day like over and over again.
Well, especially like the jungle, with like the setting sun and everything. Like it's just so the atmosphere. It's just amazing.
It's dynamic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's like
yeah.
Devin said it perfectly. You can get lost in it. I think that's what an impressive game, especially like think about this, the Super Nintendo, 1994. Like this is back when like the platforms we had were like Mario World, where it was just like a basic background. Even then, was Mario All Stars released at that point?
Yeah.
I don't know. So like
Yeah,
you had different backgrounds on that too, but like I wouldn't say you could really get lost in those. They're just like pixel art. It's just something you could really appreciate, but that's it. So
No, and that's the thing. Like Donkey Kong managed to make it like it was like layered backgrounds. So while you were moving in the foreground, the background was pretty much gave you the illusion that it was static, giving you the illusion that you were looking out in the distance at this like huge world. Whereas like with the Mario World games, or the Mario games generally, it is like the background just looks like a painted wall. Like it's nothing as dynamic as that. It's completely different. Unless we're talking about Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. That's different. But
that
that is
a
a
whole
little
other animal.
Yeah.
That's maybe the only other game on the Super Nintendo that has a like fighting chance of being the best looking thing on the entire console.
I agree.
I think the one series that I think that's the one 16-bit series I think rivaled Donkey Kong Country with like its backgrounds was Sonic. Like look at like some of the backgrounds in Sonic and like it's very on par. Like Sonic CD, Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It's amazing how they do it. Just like the city levels. Oh, like Sonic 2, like like Chemical Plant and such. Like very similar like vibe in terms of like being able to get lost in those backgrounds. But Donkey Kong Country I think edges out a little more for me. But we'll probably talk about this a little bit more because, like, as the series goes on, it gets better, which I think is just super impressive.
The other thing,
we'll get deeper into this.
Yeah.
Like, when we discuss like the pros and cons of each game. Should we move on to Country 2 for now?
Sure, let's do it. So Donkey Kong Country 2 came out the year after 1995. I think in November as well, so it's kind of like crazy how they finished up in a year, which is insane because I think the majority fan base, it's kind of split between Donkey Kong Country 2 and Tropical Freeze being the favorites out of the fan base. But yeah, Donkey Kong Country 2 is a landmark game. People love it. When did you guys first play it?
I played it right after I played the original in maybe 2017, 2018. And I still remember being floored. I think the backgrounds have improved since then. I mean, they're obviously improving the craft with the silicon graphics technology that they used, scanning in the 3D models. But in stages like the swamps, you can see things like the light peeking through the trees and moving along in parallax, and that blows my mind. still.
Yeah. I think for me, like my two favorite backgrounds of that game, maybe three actually, would probably be the lava levels. I love that. I think just super cool how they really do that. But also for me, it also has to be the forest levels, like like the light coming down the trees. It's really spooky. It's kind of like you see like those trees in the background, and then finally the bramble levels. Oh, I love like the way they do like the scrolling, and it's just like it makes you feel like you're in a completely different game, which I think is such a cool vibe they offer. But like that's kind of like what I think stands out the most about Donkey Kong Country 2 is those Bramble levels. I mean, we could talk about, we'll probably talk about the music in a second here because that's like a whole different topic itself. But like, it's impressive how much they did with this game.
I would agree. There's every time I see the background of the Bramble levels and up close, just the whole picture that it gives, just immense scale. You can imagine DK climbing around on all of these brambles, just going way off into the distance. And I would normally say just seeing the sky behind it kind of detracts from it, like it doesn't give enough scale. But in the context of the brambles in particular, I think it really adds to just the height that they're given, how large these things are. Like, these are not things that you would ever find in a Mario game.
It almost makes you wish there was like a open world, sorry, like a big 3D Donkey Kong game where you could explore and climb on these brambles and go around this huge island. Like that just, I want that. Like that's the kind of game I want. But like,
don't we all?
I know. We all want a new Donkey Kong game. Gotta have
Don't worry, it's rumored. Don't worry, everyone talked about the rumors that came out years prior. There's a new Donkey Kong game coming, guys. Aren't you looking forward to it?
Don't get me started.
It's going to be just like Mario Odyssey.
Don't get me started.
So, Joe, when did you first play Donkey Kong Country 2?
I feel like you already know the answer to this.
1995?
Again, I received the game in Christmas of that year. The game came out. Now, I will say this. After playing the original game a lot, because it was one of my favorite games to play, when I first put in Donkey Kong Country 2, I will not lie to you, I was initially disappointed because Donkey Kong himself was not playable. And he was my favorite in the first game. And I went, what the fuck? Okay, I was very displeased.
I understand that. That's one of my talking points on this game.
Now, after playing the game, though, literally the first, 10 minutes of me playing the game, I completely forgot about that. Absolutely forgot. Because the beginning levels, the pirate ships, everything about it was so awesome to me. First of all, I mean, I loved all that stuff even when I was a kid. Pirates and all that kind of shit. It was great. So the fact that you saw the Kremlings come back and they had a different aesthetic, they were bouncing around with fucking peg legs and shit that were made out of springs and stuff. It was hilarious. I really enjoyed it. And it was just a good ass game. The thing is, it felt different. The platforming felt different because the thing with Donkey Kong is he's powerful, but he's a little bit slower. But Diddy and Dixie are both fast. So it just made the platforming feel quicker to me. It made it feel faster and tighter. And when I was playing the game, even when I was a kid, it would definitely felt like it was harder. That's the one thing. But I enjoyed the challenge because I love platforming games. So
yeah.
I loved it. And I loved the whole, going up the stages instead of, going right to left. Going, climbing up into the mass of the ship and all that stuff. It was incredible. The game blew me away in the first minutes of me playing it. All the way up to the end. I loved everything about it. I mean, it is my favorite game in the series. Hands down. Obviously, I will not be defending it today. Because I will be fair, but it is my favorite game. Hands down, no question. I think it's the greatest Donkey Kong game they've done. I think it's the greatest platformer on the SNES, and it's just a good-ass game. It's Rare's game, 100%. This was the game that had all over it. The thing with Donkey Kong is, he is a Miyamoto creation. He is a Nintendo creation. They took the character, reshaped him, and made it their own, but they're still taking Miyamoto's character and modernizing him. Diddy Kong is their character. Dixie Kong is their character. This was 150% their game. It didn't have like Nintendo's, the only thing Nintendo had on it was their name. That was it. Rare made this. This was the game I feel like they wanted to make initially. And because the first game did so well, this was their excuse. They were like, we can do this now. We can do whatever we want. And they did exactly that. Everything about it. They changed up the atmosphere. You went from the jungles and the temples to, more of a spooky atmosphere, being on a creepy island, like you said, the bramble levels, the crazy amusement park, the pirate ships. It was just fantastic. Darker atmosphere, darker music. I mean, if you want to get technical, even the story itself was a little bit darker because, K. Rool kidnapped Donkey Kong. He had him captured. They have to save the hero from the first game. They need to get him. And I mean, even when you get to the end, he's torturing this man. Like, he's literally hanging him in his ship and shooting him with his blunderbuss at close range. Like, everything about this game was so much more mature, it felt. Like, even when I was a kid, I felt like I was playing this grown-up game that I shouldn't be playing. It was amazing.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I totally agree with that. Like, there's a lot of great points there. And I'll definitely bring those up in my points as I will be defending Donkey Kong Country 2.
You don't have to debate anymore. Joe just
I joke and
just did it for you.
Exactly, but I first played Donkey Kong Country 2 when I was a kid, long ago, for about 3 minutes. I was at a Target, and they had like a little demo of Game Boy Advance game you could play, and I think in the game they were demoing was Donkey Kong Country 2. I played it. I vividly remember it was one of the levels where you have to go up the mast of the ship, and I died. I said this game was too hard, and I never played it until far later in the future. I played it I think the first time. What was the first time I played Donkey? Oh yeah, then I played it when I was a little bit older. I think maybe my teenage years. On the Game Boy Advance remake. That was the first time I played it, so I got to experience the new boss they added, which was kind of okay to be honest, and the kind of decent but not great
Kerosene.
music as well. Yeah, Kerosene. Remember that. Thank you, Devin. And then I played it then. And then now I have played it through Switch. I've played it through the Switch online. I've played it on the original hardware, and I've played it through the SNES Classic as well. Actually, wait, not SNES Classic. Excuse me, what's the other one? There's something I'm forgetting about, but the Wii U. Sorry, I waited the Wii U eShop too. Sorry, I played it through quite a few means. So, but. Yeah, Donkey Kong Country 2, I love. Part of the reason why I love it is the music. Like, I could gush on it, but I would say it is my favorite Donkey Kong Country. It's my favorite video game soundtrack of all time. There's, like, I don't think there's a bad song in that soundtrack. Everything hits hard. It is music I could listen to over and over again. Like, I remember Forest Interlude was probably the song that really got me into the soundtrack, and that's probably my favorite song. It's probably my favorite song from that game. But then Sticker Rush Symphony is amazing. I don't care if I'm saying it wrong. Sticker Brush just sounds better than Sticker Bush, to be honest.
It does. You're right.
Yeah, it's like I
Don't
get
worry,
it.
you grew up on the GBA port. You get to say Sticker Brush because that's
Yeah.
where it came from. That makes
Oh
sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah, and then Hothead Bop is like, oh, why
It's a
is that
bop.
song not in Smash? It would have been perfect just for a remix. Like seriously, we didn't need another jungle remix. We needed that for one. So
It's in the
The
name.
worst version of the DK rap.
yeah, just give us Hothead Bop and like make it like amazing. But yeah, I love Donkey Kong Country 2's soundtrack. It is for me, my goal is to someday meet David Wise and shake his hand and tell him thank you for making the greatest video game soundtrack of all time.
Ain't
Simple
that
stuff.
the truth?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I love Donkey Kong Country 2. It's funny because it's not the first game I really got into. Like that'll be the next game, but Donkey Kong Country 2 really is like such an amazing game. And I'll bring up my points later on. As again, these will be like kind of reiterating a little bit. But yeah, should we move on to 3 now?
Yes,
Absolutely.
I mean, I honestly thought you and Joe were gonna be defending each other's games going into this because you were always the DKC3 guy. Love it.
I am. I mean, here, Joe. If you really want to, we could switch it up. I don't mind. I mean, last minute switch.
No, I like the challenge.
All right. Challenge it is. Which brings us to Donkey Kong Country 3. Donkey Kong Country 3 is a game that came out in 1996, right on the cusp of the N64 coming out. So, kind of a weird time for it to come out. Joe, do you want to start us off? When did you first play Donkey Kong Country 3?
Believe it or not, I did not play Donkey Kong Country 3 the year that it released. My
Impossible.
true story, my mom didn't realize that there was a third game. She had no idea until she went into Toys R Us to get stuff for me and my brother for Easter that year. And she saw that there was a third game and she was like, oh, like, so she got it and threw it in our basket. So, of course, I got it and I was like, oh, like, I was hyped because I didn't know there was a third game either. I'm not going to lie. I feel like the third game really flew under the radar because, like you said, it came out during the N64. Everybody was excited for Nintendo 64. Everybody was looking at Mario 64 and everything like that. Nobody was giving that much of a shit about whatever was coming out on the Super Nintendo. So Donkey Kong Country 3 really just went completely under the radar. Nobody knew. I mean, not I want to say nobody, but a lot of people didn't realize it was coming out. So I got it that day, put it in my SNES. And of course they switched up the Kongs again. They gave me Kiddy Kong. Now, I'm not going to lie. A lot of people hate Kiddy Kong, but I actually did not hate him because, again, I like the bigger Kongs. So, like, DK, he's powerful. I liked Kiddy for that reason. The first thing that stood out to me with 3 is, funnily enough, is the music. Like, even back then, I could tell the music was not the same as it was in the previous 2 games. I mean, obviously it wasn't. It was done by a completely different composer, Evelyn Fisher, who did work on the previous 2 games, but she did like a few songs here and there, whereas now she was the lead composer. So the songs definitely seemed different, which made the atmosphere of the game seem different, but not in a bad way. Like, I didn't hate it. The one thing that really got me with 3 was the spectacle. It was a much bigger game, or it felt like a bigger game to me. It felt like a bigger world. I mean, when it comes to like the map, it was free roam based almost. Like, you're going around in the hovercrafts and all that stuff, which was crazy for the time. I'd never seen a game like that necessarily, with at least a platforming game anyway. And then the stages and stuff. Again, the spectacle. The stages, the beginning stages especially, the docks, where you're in the water and you're like looking out on the lake. So like the water line is on the screen and it just fades out into the darkness of the water while in the background you see like the forests and the mountains, was crazy. Like, it was easily one of the greatest looking games I had played on the SNES. I was like blown away at how good it looked. And of course the platforming was still great. So, I enjoyed it very much when I was a kid. I still wouldn't say it was my favorite one back then, but I did like it.
Yeah, definitely did a lot of that. Donkey Kong Country 3 is a game that it's really weird. So I remember I got it for Christmas, or technically my one of my siblings got it for Christmas, but then, I just played it because I really wanted to play it because I liked the first one. Fell in love with it. If I'm being completely honest, that is the game that really, really got me into video game music. Like, I remember listening to the Waterfall theme all the time. Like, that was like from the Game Boy Advance version, I should mention, and loved it. Little did I know that there was 2 different soundtracks. So I got the David Wise version, which I still hold up as being the better of the 2 soundtracks. I know people love the SNES one, but I don't know, the Game Boy Advance one is a little bit better in my opinion. But I'll address both because there's definitely some bangers of both. But yeah, then I remember listening to Treetop Tumble, which is another of my favorite ones from the Game Boy Advance version. Everyone makes fun of it, but I just think it's really, really catchy. It's a great song. It's it doesn't sound like it would fit for those stages, but that's why I love them. That's why I love it. But yeah, I really did enjoy Donkey Kong Country 3. The open world, open nature end of it was really fun. If I'm being honest, if they were to ever to adapt any of the Donkey Kong Country original trilogy games into a 3D platformer, I think that one would work the best. I'd want 2 to be first, to be honest, because I think it would be cooler, but I think 3 would be the best because it feels like it would naturally fit, like each world being its own little open world area, But yeah, I remember being very similar, like, Kitty was kind of okay at first, but I kind of grew to like not hate him, I guess. I don't know. I felt like his hate was kind of overblown. I think people just, if I'm being honest, I think people just listen to like annoying YouTube critics who are like, oh, he's annoying because he's a baby. I'm like, it's a video game character. It's fine, dude. It's not that big of a deal. I'm like, come on, man. So like, I never really hated Kitty all that much, and like Kitty Kong was fine. Dixie Kong I always really liked too. I remember when I was young, like really, I was like probably 6. I remember I was at a Christmas gathering. I think the year after I got Donkey Kong Country 3 on Game Boy Advance. I remember me and my cousin were like in the pool, like swimming around, and I asked her, I was like, "Hey, do you want to pretend play Donkey Kong Country 3? I'll be Kitty Kong." So Donkey Kong
Kitty
really...
role play at the family reunion.
Oh man,
Oh boy,
that's when they knew.
we got into this. Oh boy,
the Donkey Kong Country roleplay, baby. That's what has to happen, Like
we are in the stew now.
got to grab the barrels, got to be throwing that.
The water is
great.
getting hot.
Well, the whole reason, shut up. The whole reason why I did that is because I was in the water. I was in the water, and that reminded me of the water levels, From like,
Did you do the kitty dog paddle?
I hope so.
That he does in the fucking games.
He said, "Wait, let me go get my feety pajamas. Hold on, I'll be right back."
All right.
But yeah, I mentioned that to say that I love Donkey Kong Country 3. It was like one of my favorite games, and I don't know why I sold it. I sold it like a year later, and then I was sad, and then I found it at a game. Then I found it at a GameStop a couple years later.
You monster.
But then I found it at a GameStop a couple years later and got really into it, and I love it. So yeah, Donkey Kong Country 3 is my favorite, one of my favorites at least. Devin, how about you?
So, I'm going to be completely transparent here. Of all the games we're going to be talking about, except for possibly the bonus one, not going to mention what it is because it's supposed to be a secret, this is the only one I have not completed. I've tried a couple of times, but this is not my favorite. It's probably my least favorite of the 5 that we're going to be talking about today.
Devin, I can't believe it.
Oh my goodness.
That being said, I still think that this is the best looking game on the SNES. Like, I think this outdoes the original too by a significant margin. Joe, in the DKC2 section, you talked about how the platforming and level design became a little bit more vertical. And I think this game expands upon that while it goes in both directions a little bit more. Like in DKC1, it was mostly just left to right. And DKC2, there was a lot up and down or left to right, but not a whole lot of both. And I think this game has a nice mixture of both of that. And like especially in the rope level, the one where you're climbing up just the rope, I think that's a really, really cool concept. Things like that. And there are a lot of cool level gimmicks in this game, which I'll get to in depth once we start talking about it. But yeah, it's not my favorite. It's got more of a puzzle platformer sort of orientation, and I'm not the biggest fan of that. You got like almost puzzle bosses in the way that they're structured, and a lot of the mill levels can kind of drag on a little bit. But overall, I still think it's a really good game. I do need to finish it at one point. I just haven't quite been able to get there yet. But I still do like the game.
Yeah, I forgot to mention the backgrounds in the game are like some of my favorites. Like Joe was saying, the first level, like the Lake Orangutanga. Oh, love that background so much. It just looks so cool how like you can tell there's like different like layers to it. You can see like the whole lake. It's so cool. And then like the canyon levels, like the rope level, like Devlin mentioned, that background is so cool. Like literally, like one of my favorite levels in the entire franchise is like this one where you're just like using ropes to kind of go horizontal across the stage, and you're jumping up ropes and stuff. It's a really quick and fun level, but like I love it because you can just look and get a great view of like the entire canyon, and like you see a river down there, and you're like, oh, where's that river lead? Like like just trying to picture a story around that whole level, and it's interesting because you can tell all of the design, all of it is intentionally there. It's not floating in midair. It's not like it's intentionally made to look like it's part of the whole world. It's not like a random thing, which I
Yeah,
think
it
is really
looks
cool.
tangible.
Yeah, like you could theoretically like go there yourself and you could see it being there. It's not like impossible in real life, which I think is really cool.
Of the original three, this and probably the entire series, this is by far the most realistic between the lakes and all the mills are the least visually interesting levels. I think we could all probably agree on that. But like again, the cliffs, I did want to specifically mention a cliff level because I'm always blown away by the vastness of it all.
Mhm.
It's a game that makes everything feel very vast and grand.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, the world that you can travel around you don't have to go to Funky's flights to pay to backtrack to whatever world. It's a very grand adventure, and I
Mhm.
appreciate that about it.
Yeah, like what was I gonna say? I'd actually argue that the jungle levels are probably the least interesting because they're just kind of there and they don't really do much to really differentiate from like other levels and like other jungle levels in the series. I think the mill levels are cool because it gets an indoor location, which doesn't happen often in the Donkey Kong Country series. But
Mm,
yeah, like I love the different like ways they work with it, and I think it'd be cool to like I'm not gonna lie, someday I'd love to like see like a Donkey Kong Mania, like they did for Sonic Mania, where they just like remix different levels, like different level tropes and stuff. I don't know, it'd be really cool.
mm, that would be nice. Uh, we can dream. We
Yeah,
can't receive.
keep
We can
dreaming, but
Maybe
we're
someday.
never gonna make a new Donkey Kong game.
Honestly, before we
Oh,
move on from 3, my favorite thing about it is I like the forest levels with where you're inside the trees.
Hmm.
Like the big giant, like it looks like the hollowed out trees and you're on the
mm,
inside. And I like how it goes, a lot of those go vertical, but then they also
Yeah,
go left to right, so it mixes it up.
yeah,
Those are awesome. I love those
yeah.
stages.
They totally like they really work with the concept because they could have just done a forest level like the levels from Deep Donkey Kong Country 2, but instead they did a like you're inside a tree, which I think is way cooler, and it harkens back to DKC 1 with the treetop levels, which I think is just another cool callback. Um, it is interesting though, like real quick. So people like to talk about how Donkey Kong Country 3 doesn't really have a theme. Like they say like it's either nature versus machines or nature versus, whatever, or it's like someone says it's Canada theme, which I think is pretty funny. Um, like, what do you guys think? What do you think is like the overall theme? If like Donkey Kong Country 1 is just like regular island stuff, DKC 2 is, or Donkey Kong Country 2 is like pirates and stuff. What do you guys think the third game's theme is?
it's definitely nature themed. Every time I see it, I think of vacations I've had in like Maine and places
Mm,
like that. I look at these rundown buildings on little islands and big lakes, and I say, "Wow, I've like seen that myself." And I'm I'm always a sucker for lake levels, honestly. Like in Bowser's Fury, how you can look out and see the mountains in the distance and all that. That gets me really good. I love that. But yeah, it's definitely more of a outdoorsy game in
hmm.
comparison to the other two. You're talking to bears, like it's fucking Smokey Bear.
Yeah.
Them
Yeah,
brothers.
yeah, them brothers. I don't know. I think it's supposed to feel like a very outdoorsy game, and I think that's intentional given the almost. I did want to touch on this later, but as the series progresses, I think some of the character designs get a little bit worse, but some of them get really cool. Like the zingers in this game,
Mm,
I
yeah.
think are so fucking cool. They are buzz saws,
Yeah, they're really
and
cool. They're
Yeah.
like
they're,
machines.
Hmm.
and people say like, "Oh, Baron K. Rulenstein, I don't like it. He's what the fuck is this? He's supposed to be a king or a pirate." But I don't know. I think it's cool, like how he's experimenting on old enemies and turning them. If you look at some of the Kremlings in this game, they look almost sickly, and I think that's a very intentional choice.
Mm-hmm.
I actually,
Yeah,
I have an interesting theory with Donkey Kong Country 3 and the enemies, but I'll get into that when we actually, like, start bringing up the pros and cons and getting into the nitty-gritty of that kind of stuff.
Well, that probably brings us to our next game then. Donkey Kong Country Returns.
Step back, everyone.
Oh boy, time to see Devin in his prime.
Dude,
All right,
he's probably
Devin, when
unrolling
did you
his-
first play?
Unrolling his thesis right now.
Yeah, this was my Donkey Kong launch game. What can I say? I played this in 2010 when it came out. I don't think I got it launch day, but somewhere around there. Oh God, where do I even begin with this? I don't know how to start talking about this game without just unloading way too much speech.
He's
I mean, you
smiling
couldn't-
from ear to ear right
you couldn't
now. I
wait
can hear it on his
So-
voice. He's so giddy.
I'm gonna let you two go first on this one.
Ooh.
Okay.
When did you guys first play this game? Did you first play this game? Did anyone play this game but me? We'll find out now.
I can go first. So I, if you don't mind, please, Joe. I don't mind Joe.
I don't mind.
If you don't mind, Joe.
But
Uh,
crash.
So I first played this game. I actually never bought it. I only rented it, and I got through the game pretty fast. I remember being interested in it, but then kind of realizing very quickly it didn't have the Kremlings and being kind of disappointed. I liked it. The music was kind of hit or miss. There was a couple songs I really liked, but like example, like Music Madness is a really one I really enjoyed, and then the Rocket Barrel theme I was interested in, but like everything else felt kind of wasn't super interested in, and I couldn't put my finger on why. It just felt like it was a good game, and I really enjoyed my time with it, but I never felt like I was like that interested in it. And then that kind of carried over when I got the 3DS version later on, when I actually fully got through the game and played it again. I kind of realized that for me, it's a good game, but like it misses, for me at least, it missed the mark of not having the Kremlings in it, or at least not really tying to the rest of the series, and it felt like it was its own thing, which to like people wanting the series to reboot, that's great, but for me who loved like the legacy cast, who wanted to see Dixie Kong, who wanted to see Funky, who wanted to see Funky again, they're all just gone. I was like really curious, and I'll bring this up when we have our debate itself, because like that's a big point for me. A contention is of this game is the fact that like there's really not a lot of characters. But all I'll say is the Tikis are, in my opinion, some of the worst enemies of the Donkey Kong Country series, and I would argue that Stanley the Bugman was a better villain than the Tikis.
Ooh.
But that is my hot take for the day. We'll talk about it a little later.
What a take.
I have words to
Ooh.
exchange with you.
You can hear the malice in his voice.
But first, let's hear Joe.
Alrighty. Well, I got the game on launch day. I specifically went to GameStop at midnight to pick the game up because I
That's
was
a true fucking fan right there.
I was very excited.
Did you get your banana pre-order from GameStop?
Yeah, I did actually.
You got the Wii remote holding the banana?
Yep, and I still own
Yeah.
it. Oh yeah. Dude, here's the thing. As somebody who was extremely coherent, alive and well, and very well aware of everything that was happening with the Rare buyout, and I lived through Donkey Konga and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, who anybody who follows my channel at all knows how I feel about those fucking games. Okay? The fact is that when I was playing those games, they did not feel like Donkey Kong games to me at all. I mean, one is a music game, so obviously. The other one, though, is DK alone on some who knows what island, beating the shit out of animals. And I was like, where is literally everyone else? Where's Diddy Kong? Where's Funky Kong? Where's Cranky Kong? Where's King K. Rool? I just was like, where the hell are they? Okay? So I was waiting. And then they finally announced this game. And you can't imagine how fucking giddy I was, dude. I was like, yes. Finally, dude. Like, I saw DK, I saw Diddy. I was like, it's all I needed to see. And it was a platformer. I was so excited. So I had to get this game. I got it. I played it. And I loved it. Okay, I did. Soundtrack was, yeah, it was alright. You know, like what you said. A little hit or miss. I mean, it was great hearing the old music again, though. I was like, yeah, okay, love it, right? But I will say, yes, the lack of the Kremlings was one thing that really killed my fucking vibe with this game. Like, I was initially really looking forward to the possibility of them coming back, especially when I found out it was basically like a redo or rehash of the original game. So I was like, okay, like, you know, they're bringing back everything. But no, they had the Tikis, and I agree with you. I think the Tikis are really weak in terms of being an enemy. Their designs are kind of whatever. They don't really feel Donkey Kong to me. I know that seems like a weird thing to say, but they just, aesthetically, they just don't fit. I don't know. I don't really like them either. And then the final boss, Tiki Tong, or whatever the hell his name is, I couldn't stand that motherfucker. I'm sorry. I hate when Nintendo falls back on the whole giant head with hands, detached hands thing. They do it in way too many games. Okay, like, yeah, we had it in some classics. You know, like Andross and all that shit. And then they had Bongo Bongo in Legend of Zelda. Okay, fine. But, like, we had it in Mario, we had it in Zelda, we had it in Star Fox. They just do it over and over and over again. And then here it is as this final boss. And I was like, I could have had King K. Rool. I could have had him in some new costume doing some wild shit. And I'm like, instead I'm getting these hands and a giant head that I've fought many times. I was like, I didn't care for that. But all of that really, honestly, were nitpicks at the time. Because I was just so happy to have Donkey Kong back. I felt like it was finally back where it was supposed to be. Like, I felt like we were catching up to where we should have been years ago. And, like, it was just super exciting to have DK, Diddy Kong back. Cranky Kong obviously came back. So I was just excited to see the characters that, at the time, when Jungle Beat came out, I honestly thought Nintendo was just done with these guys. Like, I was just, like, you know, extremely disappointed on the Donkey Kong fan end. Of course, there were some crossover games where the Kremlings and all they were in there, and DK and all them were, Diddy and all were in it. But his main series just felt like it was just gone. So this definitely felt like a return home to where we should have been. So I did love it overall. I was really excited, and of course the game sold really well. So I was excited to see Donkey Kong doing so good after such a long hiatus, and I was just looking forward to the future. So, yeah.
All right, Devin,
a young
you're
hopeful
up.
Joe.
All right, I appreciate Joe not thrashing this beautiful game.
I didn't thrash it. I just said like I liked
Yeah,
it, but it
all
wasn't
right,
like my
buddy.
favorite game.
He
I had high expectations
Okay,
when I was a
yeah.
kid. You know.
yeah.
I'm sure you did. Anyways, so this was my first Donkey Kong game, and as somebody that grew up without the Kremlings, I won't lie, I don't think the Tikis are as good enemies. I don't think that's a very controversial statement. I don't think they're as bad as most people say they are. They lack a lot of personality. I won't lie. But in terms of the character design, I think that they are good enemies. It's just a drum. You fucking jump on the head of it, and it goes kunk, and it is more or less everything I'd ever want from that. In terms of the actual game, I think the momentum and just general engine that they made is superior to the old games. It's a much smoother experience overall. In all of the old games, you could do a roll, and if you don't jump out of the end of it, you just kind of stop a little bit at the end of the roll. And that always got me a little bit. It's not, the animation's a little bit weird. You aren't entirely sure when you're still in roll, when you're not in roll. It's still a very serviceable thing, and I do like how you speed up in the older games when you hit an enemy. But in the new games, it's just a consistent burst of momentum, and it doesn't slow you down coming out of it. And if you have Diddy, you can continually roll, which I think is a fantastic feature. I think Diddy just being an addition to Donkey Kong as a little bit of extra help for platforming, because quite frankly, this is the hardest game in the series. I think that is very helpful and just a very cool addition. And co-op. Co-op in a Donkey Kong game, real-time co-op in a Donkey Kong game is something that I don't think this game gets quite enough credit for. Tropical Freeze added a couple more characters, and we'll get to Tropical Freeze. But me and my brothers played this game so long in co-op. It works astoundingly well, given how precise the game can be.
That makes sense.
But
keep going. Sorry.
I'll get more into this later on. I'm gonna keep going if I don't stop right now. So,
No, you're good. I wasn't trying to interrupt you. I was clearing my throat.
No, I was just about done there anyways for now, before I, spilled my heart about this game.
I can just hear the love in your voice.
All right.
Do we want to move on to Tropical Freeze?
Let's do Tropical Freeze. All right. I vividly remember Tropical Freeze when that game was coming out. I was a DK fan at that point. Was really excited. I remember immediately. Actually, I remember when Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D came out, and I saw the first level. I was like, "Oh, what? Oh no way! Are the Kremlings gonna be back?" And then realizing they weren't, because I was sad again. But now, with Tropical Freeze, I was like, okay, the Kremlings have to be back. It makes sense. So when they came and showcased that they weren't, it was back. It was another group. I was a little sad, but I was willing to give it a game a chance, and I'm glad I did, because Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze was a great game. I loved it. Playing that game, music was fantastic, backgrounds were fantastic, gameplay was just so tight. Loved the way they did, getting David Wise back on that soundtrack was so good. Seriously, some of the best decisions they made. So yeah. Tropical Freeze is great. I think I played it a year after it came out. I don't think I played it immediately, but I remember. Then I played it again on Switch when it came out. Gotta play that new funky mode, because does that count as a separate release?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll count
it. On it.
I don't think so. It's barely anything different. All I know is that Metroid fans, I am so glad we got Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze instead of a Metroid game that year. I am so glad we did.
They were very
I'm so glad we did, because I am not gonna lie, the amount of upset Metroid fans that were so angry that it was just another Donkey Kong game kind of made me mad. I was like, really? You can't let us enjoy us getting another game instead of you guys? You guys got 4 games. Let us get at least 2. That's fine, That was what I was mad. So I'm not gonna lie, seeing Donkey Kong appear, I was like, okay, let's go. This is what I want.
Fair enough. That all?
For now at least, yes.
All right. I'll go. I guess I'll go. Now I'm thinking about it. I did not play the original 3 games in 2017 because the Virtual Console wasn't around then. Just pretend like I played them just pretend like I said I played them when the Virtual Console came out. Anyways, Tropical Freeze is, I would call it the best game in the series if it did not have water levels. And
damn.
I know that seems like a very petty reason. The controls underwater are some of the best I've played in any game. I think the only game that tops it is Rayman Legends in terms of water control. And they're beautiful levels, obviously. They've got all the things that all water levels have going for them. But the best water level still slows down the pace a tremendous amount. And this game has an entire world of them. Returns had 8 worlds. This game only has 6. So the ratio of water levels to regular levels, it's pretty high. And some of the water levels, honestly, are real fucking stinkers. Like the one where you have to get a bunch of keys and move and go. I know you know the one that I'm talking about. It's just a little bit disappointing because they added shit like an air meter. Why?
Yeah, in a 2D platformer especially.
I
mean,
agree. It's dumb.
It's I don't know. If they had reeled back on them a little bit, I would not hesitate to make this the best game in the series. But because it kept all the shit that Returns added that I love, added more on top of it, like new characters, better level design out of water, and it had better bosses. It just has so much, and just you hit World 4 and it all just stops dead in its tracks. But I still love the game, like a tremendous amount. It hasn't stopped me from completing it 200% in normal and funky mode. I love this game to death. That's all.
Is it my turn?
Yeah,
I think so.
I suppose it is.
Oh. So, again, Tropical Freeze was a launch. I bought that on launch day. I forget. I think Tropical Freeze came with something too when it launched, but I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. But I definitely got something. I don't remember. But either way.
A frozen weed banana pouch holder. It's just encased in ice.
I think so. I think that was it. I got the game. Of course, I'm with Level on the fact that I thought this was it. I was like, okay. We didn't have the Kremlings in Returns. So I was like, all right, that's fine. I was like, but this time, they got to be coming back. And the thing was even when I saw the trailer for this game, and I saw the Snowmads, like the penguins and all that shit, I thought to myself, just because it's like a bunch of Viking mammal characters doesn't necessarily mean that King K. Rool isn't the one that's leading them. Because up to this point, I figured if they were following the actual lore of the games, which, I kind of thought maybe they might be to a point. The Kremlings kind of got shit on a lot. Like, their whole island sank. Then they were up in the northern Kremisphere, and they got beat again. And then in Donkey Kong 64, they were on a ship, one big old floating castle. So I was like, okay, so maybe the Kremlings are kind of slowly diminishing. So King K. Rool's forces are more like varied creatures. Because the thing is the thing that really did get me with Tropical Freeze was that when they teased the game initially, they purposely kept Frederick blacked out all the time. You never saw what he looked like.
Mm.
And so I see this big fat dude with a helmet on, and I'm like, oh, well, come on. I'm like, who could that possibly be? I was like, it's gotta be him. And it's been a long time now, so I don't know if you guys remember or not, but I was very active on the internet at that time, and a large amount of people within the community actually did think it was King K. Rool. Like, they really did. Like, a lot of people were talking about it on forums, all over the place. And there were even some, now obviously fake images and things that were going around that people were saying, it's him, it's King K. Rool, he's back, whatever. And obviously when the game finally came out, we finally got the reveal of Frederick. He's just a big fat walrus. Which I was just like, okay. Like, a part of me was just like, why even do that? Why shadow him out and make him seem like he's this other character? The only thing I could think of was for marketing purposes. Like, to make people think that way. Like, oh, it's gotta be him, and then it's not. But again, that's just a nitpick. Like, the Snowmads from a design standpoint are superior to the Tikis in every single way. I definitely think that on a design level, they are similar or on par with the Kremlings. I think they're just as good. I definitely, they're just as goofy, they're just as fun. Little penguins especially, like, they're hilarious. So I think they did a really good job there. And I mean, obviously it makes more sense for, these Antarctic type animals to be Vikings, because snow and ice and all that shit. So that's fine. Again, the enemies were just a nitpick for me more than anything. But generally, I mean, the game blew me away. I knew I was going to like it because I did like Returns. And again, we were getting another Donkey Kong game, which I was like, okay, in my naive mind, I thought, oh, Donkey Kong's going to be getting some steady games. So, here we go. Here's another good one. And obviously, I love the game. Like, everything about it. I love the fact that they brought back Funky Kong. And Dixie Kong obviously was huge, the fact that they brought her back. I was like, finally. I was like, they're finally acknowledging more Kongs. I was super excited about that. I love the fact that you had multiple Kongs to play as. You weren't just locked to Diddy and DK. You had Dixie Kong, you had Cranky Kong, and Cranky being playable was also really cool. Especially because if you think back to the original games, where, Cranky Kong would always talk shit, and he would say stuff like, oh, well, if I was playable, or if I was in the game, we would have beat it in like 5 seconds, and it was funny to me that he was finally in there. I was like, that's great. So, that was really cool. I loved all that. There was so much variety, and then the levels felt good, and honestly, my one thing that I didn't care for too much, or another thing I didn't care for too much with, like, Returns was I felt like aesthetically, Returns was a little weird. And I mean, we'll get to that more in detail when we talk about that, but I feel like Tropical Freeze felt more similar to the Rare games in terms of aesthetics, like the other islands, like the poisonous jungle with the purple water and like all that kind of stuff. I felt like it felt more like it fit the Donkey Kong mold, so I enjoyed it. I mean, the stages are beautiful. Like, it is a beautiful game. Even, it still holds up to this day from the Wii U hardware, I'm sorry. It still looks like, a phenomenal game. Everything about it is great. The character models, Donkey Kong's character model in Tropical Freeze is like peak Donkey Kong. Like, I think it's the perfect design for him. I love, like, the way they designed him, like the muscularity and everything. Like, I think he looks really, really cool. He's sleek, but he's like big and muscly at the same time. Perfect DK. Peak DK. So, Tropical Freeze was a great game from so many standpoints. And the music, of course, bringing back David Weiss, amazing choice. I know Devin doesn't like the water stages, but personally, I do enjoy water stages. I especially like aquatic ambience coming back because of the water stages. And David Weiss, obviously. So that was fantastic. And the other thing that I thought was great was I loved how they still referenced Returns in this game to the point of where when you go back to DK Isle that's completely frozen, you have old bosses and old enemies and stuff frozen in the ice in the background. I thought that was such a good choice. Like, that was hilarious. Because it just kept it
so fucking cool. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to touch on that specifically later on.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think the game could have done better on is imagine if one of the worlds was a frozen crocodile isle.
That would have been cool, yeah. That would have been
just
awesome.
Imagine it. Like, just imagine if they don't want to put the Kremlings in the game, maybe like make it like the remnants of that. And, like, maybe you have to go through and like maybe like, oh, who cares? Like, what about the lore? Like, it'd be fun, make it like just like something like that. I don't know.
But I really love that. I thought that was amazing. Like, that you're basically just retreading Returns as DK Isle, but it's a little different now because everything's frozen over. It was very smart from a design standpoint. It was really good. And obviously, like, Tropical Freeze did everything Returns did, but better. It just took all the same mechanics, turned them up, and literally was just peak of what retro could do with Donkey Kong, at least as far as we know, because they never got another game, so who knows. But it really was fantastic, and it was the only game, I feel, out of the entire series that really gives Diddy's Conquest a run for its money in terms of everything. Platforming, atmosphere, design, like, it really is a near perfect Donkey Kong game. My only major criticism of it is the lack of Kremlings. And, like, that's it. had K. Rool appeared in that game, I would be comfortable to say that Tropical Freeze is the greatest Donkey Kong game they've ever made. But he's the one shortcoming. Especially because, as a fan of the character, I feel like he's been burned so many times now. So, like, that just always is going to leave, like, a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, no matter what. Because I hate the fact that they ignore him so much. But we can get more into that, like, a little bit later. But yeah, Tropical Freeze was a great game. It definitely... I do feel like it really suffered from being on the Wii U. I don't think enough people played it, and still to this day, I don't think enough people give it a chance. Because, like, nowadays, a lot of people just see it as a Wii U port. They're like, oh, I don't want, whatever. Because the Wii U just has such a negativity around it, but it really is one of the greatest 2D platforming games. It kicks the shit out of every 3D, 2D Mario game. Like, the 2.5D ones, like, New Super Mario Brothers and all that shit. It's miles better than those games. Like, it doesn't even come close in terms of quality. The game is amazing, and I don't think enough people have played it. So, yeah. I love it. I do love it quite a bit.
Wow, that was very winded. Appreciate it, Joe.
Yeah, sorry, I got on. It's
No,
one of
you're
my
good.
favorite ones, so
You're good.
All right. So now where do we go from here?
All right, now that everyone's talked about Tropical Freeze, we're going to talk real quick about our bonus game before we go.
Oh, wait,
boy.
no, we should save the bonus game for the very, very, very end.
All right, we'll save it for the very, very end. We'll do that.
Fuck.
All right, so, Devin, I think it's time for you to tell us why Donkey Kong Country Donkey Kong Country Returns, in your opinion, is the best Donkey Kong Country game. Lay it on you. This is the time where the debate begins. Let us begin with Donkey Kong Country Returns.
Okay. So, I know that you guys love the Kremlings. I know that you guys love King K. Rool. I would like to ask you as to why. I know K. Rool is an eccentric villain, and he's got a better boss aura to him and more character than really anyone in the entire Donkey Kong series. So, I mean, compared to Lord Frederick and Tiki Tong especially, I think K. Rool blows them out of the water. But in terms of the Kremlings themselves, what's actually so special about them? I don't think any of their designs really are anything better than what the Snowmads had. I do want to hear why you guys favor the Kremlings so hard.
I'm being honest, I like the Kremlings a lot because each game really evolves them. I mean, Joe was talking about this, like with the like the bees. I can't remember what they're called now. Dang it.
Zingers.
Zingers, yes, like the zingers. They started as just normal bees in the first one, and the second one they get a little sharper, a little more deranged, which is like you can say that's their main hive, And then the third one, they're just freaking buzzsaws. They're machines. Like I love the progression you can see. I love that like they wear different outfits. Like the first one had like kind of like we had King K. Rool, and he had like an army. So we had like army Kremlings. You had Kremlings who were like kind of looking like pirates a little bit. You had Kremlings who were like commandos. I think that's a really cool option. And as you go further in the series, you see them progress and evolve and put on different outfits. It's a lot of people. Some people like love Mario Party 2 out of all of them. It's like maybe not be the best Mario Party, but it has the one where they wear costumes and it makes them look different dynamically. And I think the same thing for like for the Kremlings is that like they wear different costumes. They have silly voices when they die. They go oh, which I mean that's just funny.
That is my favorite part of the Kremlings.
Oh, it's great. And like for me, I also like that example. I like that like Klubba and. Too, like he's an ally. He works with you. I think that's cool. I think there's a lot of different Kremlings that have a lot of personality, and I don't know. I think for me, it makes it, for me at least, it just makes me more interested in seeing them in a series as much as like the Snowmads were. Like I don't think an enemy needs to be a crocodile or alligator or whatever, some kind of reptile to be a good villain. I just think that For me, like Snowmads were a good step in the right direction, but I think the Kremlings deserve a return. That's what I was saying. So
Fair enough. I just think because of the fact that they aren't crocodiles and because of the frankly cruel bait and switch that they did with Lord Frederick, because they knew exactly what they were doing with that. I that's pretty blatant. But I think the Snowmads in particular have an a large amount of personality to them that really goes underappreciated because of the want for Kremlings and the neglect that they've received over the years. If you stop and just take a look at their animations, you walk up behind them and they turn around and slap you. There is a lot of care and effort put into every single animation of at least the main penguins and walruses and such. Like the owls, take it or leave it. They're just kind of angry, but that's what zingers were. Except now you can use them as dynamic floating platforms, which is something that I think the Tikis really started with. Just a dynamic platform, something to be jumped off of. They did a little bit of that with like the Dragonflies and Donkey Kong Country 2, and a little bit of that with the Vultures in 1. But I think in the Return series, that's where integrating these enemies into the actual platforming challenge, rather than just having like, someone walking on a platform, you have to throw a barrel at them to get them out of there, and then you can jump on top. Like, what's the level in DKC 1? The final one where you have the invincible Kremlings walking around and you have to throw the barrels at them.
oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like I think it's like something. I know what you're talking about though.
But it's that change from enemies just being in the way to enemies being integrated into the levels in a much more dynamic way that I really think makes these enemies greater than maybe they're given credit for. I'm still not going to argue that the Tiki Tak tribe has a whole lot of personality to them. They don't. They are more or less entirely functional. I still think they look pretty cool, but I can't really argue for Tiki Tak or Tiki Tong being better than K. Rool. But to hold that against the game so ferociously, I think really detracts from what the enemies actually are. And that seems to be the biggest knock to the Return series as a whole. The fact that K. Rool isn't there, which is inexcusable. But at the same time, in a series like Mega Man, how many times has he gone up against Dr. Wily? Or Mario, how many times has he gone up against Bowser? And looking back on these older games where they weren't afraid to try something new, like the Mario Land games, people praise the different enemies and final bosses, like, Tatanga from Super Mario Land, or Wario from Super Mario Land 2, Wart from Super Mario Bros. 2. These enemies, they have a lot of love for them because the same ones have been reused ever since. So I don't think it's really that bad of a thing to change up the cast of baddies. And I think the Snowmads do a very good job of that. Personally.
Here's the thing, I kind of agree with you, but at the same time, the thing I don't like about Returns is not that they didn't include King K. Rool, it's that they basically are acting like he doesn't exist. Like, the director of the game basically said, or like one of the supervisors basically like, who wants to fight King K. Rool anyways? It's like, let that be its own thing. And it's like, that's dumb. Like, he's still part of canon. He's still part of the DK story, and no matter how much you want to remove him. That's why I didn't like Returns, because it felt like they didn't even care. Like, I mean, the fact that, like, example, the factory level, like, that was Kremkroc Industries. It isn't just a random factory, it's Kremkroc Industries. Like, you can't remove that. That's still the canon. So I mean, like, you could still include some aspects of them without them being the entire focus. that's what really rubbed me off the wrong
I-
way, was just the fact that they basically disregarded them, and it basically became an issue where it's like it was less of a we'll take a break on Kremlings for now. It's not like we'll never come back. It's more of they basically acted like they were never going to come back anyways, and it was basically the will of getting King K. Rool and Smash to even give us hope that he'll ever come back. I mean, to be honest, that was the biggest reason why we thought he was never going to be in Smash in the first place, is because of the fact they basically disregarded King K. Rool and the Kremlings in general. My issues with the game itself doesn't come with the. I'm not including the Kremlings. That it sucks, but it is what it is. It just comes with the fact that it's just a retread of the first Donkey Kong Country game with kind of mid music. And I will say it has very good levels, and I really enjoy what they do with those levels, and the gameplay is really tight. But at the same time, it doesn't stand out like 2 or 3 really does for me. Like, I don't know. It's like I have a hard time really differentiating between Donkey Kong Country 1 and Donkey Kong Country Returns, to be honest.
That's fair enough criticism. Now, this is very much a matter of personal opinion, but I do like the setting that Donkey Kong is in the first game and in Returns in particular. I think a jungle makes sense for him in all the worlds that he visits in Returns, and specifically. They feel like a very cohesive island. You go from a jungle and it transitions nicely into a beach, which then transitions into ruins. You can see as you go along these transitions, they have levels dedicated to them. You exit out of the mines and you blast way, way up into the forest. And it's a very nice and smooth progression that makes the world feel very alive. And I just happen to really like all the settings that he's put in. I think the cliff levels are done better than they are in 3. I think the jungle levels are more or less the best they've ever been, because in Tropical Freeze, they were frozen over. And having an entire world dedicated to minecarts, that's risky, but it's not entirely dedicated to minecarts, but it's mostly dedicated to minecarts. But I still feel like it works in the context of the game, because there are also things like rocket level, which, by the way, the rocket levels are a really cool addition that I feel could use a little bit more love thrown their way. And the minecart stages, I think, were overhauled in terms of spectacle, like in the cliff stage where you're riding the T-Rex egg and it's breaking apart as you're riding along top of it. That's awesome. There's a lot more spectacle in the Returns in Tropical Freeze, like the bat level, as infamous as it is because of the one-hit rockets, which could have used a tweak, admittedly. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, as a whole cohesive package, I don't mind that it feels like a retread of the first game, because I feel like it does everything that the first game did but better, and took elements from the entire series and did them better in its own way.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I don't like about that too, I actually do agree with you on some of that. Like, so I love the level transitions they did, but like the world between the worlds, I think that was super cool to have, and I agree it makes the world feel a lot more cohesive. I just think for me, like, it really established Donkey Kong's terrible track record of being known as just the jungle guy. Like, it was just like, oh, Donkey Kong has jungles. That's all he is. It's like that's why he was in Smash. Like, there was the reason why we only got 10 million remixes of the jungle level from Smash 4 is because that's what he was known for, and it really, I think, damaged DK's reputation. I mean, even then, like, we see like the Donkey Kong theme park they're building, it's mainly based off of Returns, and it's like you have so many different games you could pull off of. You could pull from 2, 3. Tropical Freeze would be a great choice if you wanted to go modern, but I don't know. That's my problem. Is just it feels like, yeah, it's a retread, but it basically kind of created this, I'd say, issue that basically creates a notion that Donkey Kong is only, that there's no industrial, and I think Donkey Kong is a lot more than just jungles and beaches and mines. Like, Donkey Kong has has mine shafts, or not mines, like caves. Like Donkey Kong has mine shafts. He has factories. There's waterfalls. There's giant cliffs with like different things going in and out. Like it's a lot more of like what I'd say is not. It's not a bad thing, but it's just for me at least. I like Donkey Kong when it's more expansive. When it tries to go outside of its boundaries of being a island setting. So, but I do agree with that.
The only thing is, all of those themes that you just listed are themes in Returns.
Not really, though. I mean, like, yeah, there's the mine shaft and then there's the factory, but those were from the first Donkey Kong Country game. Like, besides that, like, there's no, like, example, there's no mills, there's no, like, I missed the lake levels with the different, like boardwalks and stuff. Like, I don't know, like, I missed that kind of stuff, you know? Like, more of the classic.
Understood.
But I think we're kind of, go ahead, Devin.
My only thing on that is every time that Donkey Kong has been in an adventure without a jungle, which, by the way, even in places like he's always been in a place where that isn't his home island whenever he's not in a jungle or doesn't have a jungle level. But even in like 2, where he's on a completely different island, he does have jungle stages. And I personally think that they're subpar in terms of visuals, but I don't know if him having a tie to the jungle stages is such a bad thing. Because at the end of the day, you know, he's a gorilla. It's where he would thrive. It's where his home is. It's where his hut is, which it just makes more sense for the theme park to take place mostly around jungles. Would it be nice if they branched out into other areas? Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, to get these other crazier areas, you need to just travel to different islands. Like, you know, Tropical Freeze is all about world hopping. You travel to 6 different islands in that. And I personally think that they spend a little bit too much time in every world because the worlds last longer and the levels last longer in Tropical Freeze. And there's only 6 of them to go around. But like, the Savannah levels are cool, but I think they go on a little bit too long. I've already stated my opinion on the water world. I think the first world is a little bit of just playing it safe a little because of it's just a mixture of the beach and jungle, which there was a bit of that in Returns, but it was only a bit. It doesn't. The thing about Returns that I really love in terms of its theming and that or like level theming that I think puts it above every other game, honestly, is that it doesn't spend too much time with any one particular theme. It moves on at a pretty brisk pace and keeps things feeling fresh. And in terms of, I know you guys mentioned it doesn't feel like a Donkey Kong game, but I really don't know where that notion comes from. Like, what about it doesn't feel like a Donkey Kong location or setting? Because I heard that thrown around a little bit. And, yeah, looking... Anyone got any input on that?
Are you
Joe,
ready?
I was going to say, Joe, you haven't talked in a little while.
Are you ready, boys?
I'm ready. Aye, Captain.
All right, so we're gonna kind of backtrack a little bit because I wanted you guys to get all your stuff out there before I got into my whole tangent. Okay, it's gonna take a little bit. Well, you asked earlier why do we like King K. Rool, or why do I like King K. Rool and the Kremlings? Like, what is so great about them? And
I
mean, understand King K. Rool.
Okay.
Just the whole Kremlings. It's
partly, I'll admit from my standpoint, part of it is nostalgia, because I grew up playing the games and they were always the enemies, and I just love them because they're familiar to the series. I watched the cartoon when I was a kid, the really bad CG one with all the songs. So, of course...
I'd shop for you with coconut cream pie.
So
a mean old Yeti.
So, obviously
Nobody's
the
hero.
Kremlings were in that, and so there's a lot of nostalgia there for me when it comes to them on a personal level. Now, as someone who I'm really into like lots of different like mythology and like lots of different stories from all around the world and everything like that, and just like movies and everything generally, for some reason, apes, monkeys versus crocodiles is something that is just it's a thing. It's a story there's literally a story from India. It's a children's story about the monkey and the crocodile. Like, it's so old. Okay, there's just something about crocodiles versus apes, mammals, whatever you want to say, the reptile versus the mammal dynamic. It's just something about it. Like, crocodiles feel like they would be the perfect natural predator to the Kongs. Like, these feel like they would be the vicious enemy that would be going after them. It's the old mammal versus reptile, cold-blooded versus warm-blooded situation. And I like that aspect of things. It's something that I think is really, really cool. Now, again, they are just crocodiles. But if you go back and take a look at, the original 3 games, well, and 64 actually, let's include 64. All the relevant games that include the Kremlings, you have to admit that there is an absolute staggering amount of designs that come out of literally just crocodiles. Like, that's all they are just crocodiles. And yet, every single game, they manage to pull out these different looks and designs and attitudes and colors in these literally the same creature over and over and over again. When you look at something like Mario, you see the Koopas, they're pretty limited. They're just different colored shells. Maybe occasionally they're wearing a helmet or they have some glasses on or some crazy shit. But if you actually go back, look at Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3, and 64, and just look at how many different ways you can make a crocodile look. It's just, from a design standpoint, from somebody who's a big fan of character design and stuff like that. I mean, not to like sit here and be like, I'm an artist, but I do draw, not as much anymore, but I did a lot, and I went to school for illustration and all that kind of stuff. So I love character design. It's something that I really enjoy. So just seeing how many unique ideas they can get out of one animal is just, it's amazing to me. I love it. And I love the different themes in the different games, depending on what their boss is dressed up as. This is pretty much what they're, in a way, what they're doing. I mean, in the first game, he's a king, and they're like, army guys, but it makes sense. They're invading Donkey Kong Island, like, they are the invaders, and so they're dressed up as, military. They're going in commando style. They're fighting against the Kongs in the jungles, on the beaches. This is what they're doing. They're pirates. So in the second game, he's a pirate. He's the captain. They're pirates. They're all dressed up as pirates. They're wearing striped pants. They have hook hands and peg legs. And it's funny that they're doing this. Now, in the third game, they say there's not a theme there. But I'll talk about the theme that I feel they fit when we get to that point. But again, even when you look at those Kremlings, they are unique to the ones that came before them, one way or another. They all follow the same pattern. There's like a critter, a crusher, a club, or whatever. But yet they all still look unique. There's like 3 different versions of Claptraps, and they somehow managed to make them look different, despite the fact that they're just all crocodiles. That to me is very impressive. The character designers at Rare are like incredible, or they were incredible. Back in the day, they made some amazing things, and I think that they are very reflective of how good they really were. So I just think the Kremlings have more character than most of the nameless enemies in most games. Like, again, bring up your Mario, any of the platforming games. I think the Kremlings have a lot of character to them, and they're funny and they're well done, and I just think that they're great. And again, I like the whole reptile versus King Kong versus Godzilla. It's one of those things that just goes back really far, And I think that it does it well. And also somewhat references even Donkey Kong Arcade, because there were crocodile-type enemies in the original arcade series, because in the third game, I believe it was the third game, there are like claptrap-type enemies that go up and down the vines. So, like, they're in a way still referencing things from older Donkey Kong arcade games, literally just taking that and turning it up to 11, like what they did with everything else in Donkey Kong Country. So, you know, again, I think that's great. And just as villains, you know, they have a purpose. King K. Rool has a purpose. Like, Bowser, you know, he steals Princess Peach. Why does he do it? We don't really know why. I mean, they said it in the original manual why he did it, to take over the Mushroom Kingdom, but there really is no concrete answer as to why Bowser does what he does. He kidnaps the princess all the time. I mean, what's he trying to do? Is he take over the Mushroom Kingdom? He's invaded it so many times he could take it by force. It's just, there's no, it's just an old trope from old, it's an old trope from like old cartoons and movies, like kidnap the woman, kidnap the princess. There you go. You know, old Knight's Tales, Slay the Dragon, whatever. All that kind of shit. Donkey Kong, while they don't explicitly say it, you know, King K. Rool has a purpose to what he's doing. He's trying to take over DK's island, more than likely to take resources. So he steals his bananas to starve them out. I know it's not something that, you know, they talk about outwardly, but that definitely seems what it's like. He builds the factories. He's mining out the resources on the island. He's trying to take the island for himself to take those resources. For what purpose, we don't know, but that's not really the important part. The important part is that he wants them. And he's going through all this trouble to try to get rid of the Kongs who are a nuisance to him. In which case, you know, after everything happens, he decides to take their leader, their figurehead, because he thinks that'll do it, and they still fight against him. And then you get to see his island, which is completely just destroyed by industry. Oil barrels everywhere. The natural part of the island is disgusting. It's falling apart. It's terrible because the Kremlings have just ground it into the dirt. Like, they have sucked dry everything that was great about their home and turned it into trash. So, you know, and then it's just, they're villains with a purpose. You see King K. Rool just going crazier and crazier as the games goes on. He just gets more and more insane. So they all connect. Whereas with Bowser and Mario, again, never really did. One game ends, another game begins. Who the hell knows if that connects or not? But all of the DK games connected, and the Kremlings were integral to all that. The absolute deterioration of King K. Rool, like his psyche, to the point of where he shows up to Kong Island with basically a giant gun pointed at it, and he's just gonna blow up this island that he was trying to get for so long, because he just hates the Kongs so much. It's cool. And it's something that I would have liked to have seen carried on into the future between these two characters, this kind of dynamic. Now, that's why I like the Kremlings, so that's a whole thing with that. Now, when it comes to Returns, the reason why I don't care for it is because, or I don't think it's the best, is because you have a legacy with the series previous to this game. So Retro was taking on a game series that already existed. They weren't making a Donkey Kong game that we've never had before. They were making a Donkey Kong game in a series that already had a name, and already had an established canon, and already had established character designs. So it was their job to make a game to add into this game series. I mean, you don't put Donkey Kong Country on it and expect something different. And in a way, and I know this isn't Retro's fault, I don't blame them for this. It's the people behind them, the directors who were working on the game from Nintendo. The game, in a way, felt like a slap in the face to the games that came before it in terms of the legacy. Because while it takes the gameplay and the music from those games, and the Kongs for the most part, everything else felt like it was not connected to Donkey Kong Country at all. DK Island is nothing. It's just a normal volcano slapped on an island. It could be any island anywhere out in the ocean. They took away one of the most iconic things about Donkey Kong Island, the giant stone head of Donkey Kong himself, the name of the island literally coming from him, and that big-ass Kong head to let you know that this is DK Isle. It was something
there's a reason why they brought it back for this King K. Rool's final Smash, because it's that iconic.
Right, exactly. It was something that was important in the original games. It was something unique to the game, to the character, to the setting. And they just completely just got rid of it. And then on top of that, getting rid of the Kremlings added to that. It just felt, and again, most of the animal buddies, aside from like Rambi and Squawks, it felt to me like they were in a way trying to wash away most of the aspects of what Rare had done just to do it. Like, we don't want anybody to think about these games because we're not involved with Rare anymore. So look at this now. But to the point of where it kind of felt generic. Like, that's the thing. In the original Kong games, in the original Country games, the things have a purpose. The old temples, the temples in Returns, I can't say they don't have a purpose, because it could be like old Kong civilization or whatever, so that's fine. But especially the factories and the industrialization levels were the Kremlings. That's the reason why they were there. They were taking the resources, thus, again, they were making mine shafts. They were making factories. They were pumping, oil or doing whatever they were doing and polluting the environment of the island. They have the same things in a way in Returns, because they have the factories, yes, and all this shit. But why are they there? They have no purpose. They're literally just there to mimic the original games, to mimic the legacy of the original Kong games. They're just put in there because it's familiar. Oh, well, we got to put in our factory level. Oh, we have to put in our minecart levels. But, like, why? Like, and I get the whole thing of, oh, well, maybe human encroachment on Donkey Kong Island or whatever. That's all theory and doesn't really necessarily work, because we don't see humans at all in the series ever. And the Tikis are using all this shit. And you could say, well, the Tikis did it. But that feels way too quick. I mean, the Tikis showed up, came out of the volcano, and then all of a sudden built all this shit in a day? Like, it doesn't make sense. These things had to have been there. They already had to have been there. So, why are they there? It's literally just to be like, oh, well, they're there because it's like in the old game, remember? Yeah, I guess. But the old villains built that shit. That's why it's there in the first place. In this game, it's just there to remind you of the old games, while washing away all of the other stuff that made Donkey Kong Country feel like Donkey Kong Country. It's like Nintendo was cherry-picking what they wanted to put into the game. Like, okay, we'll take Cranky, we'll put in Diddy and DK, yeah, that's great. And we'll take Rambi. But that's it. We don't want anything else. No other aesthetics, nothing. And again, I get it, Retro was making this into their game. But the funny thing about it is that when Retro made Metroid Prime, they didn't do nearly any of that shit. They kept all the original villains. They kept all the original bad guys. I mean, you fought Ridley again for like the 8th time in the series. The only thing they didn't bring back was Kraid and the Mother Brain, but they literally referenced them in the game. So everything still exists. The aesthetics are still relatively the same. It's true to Metroid. But they just changed up the gaming style and made an amazing game. So why couldn't Donkey Kong get the same treatment? That's what I didn't understand. Why did he have to get this complete overhaul where they had to change the aesthetic, change everything about it, and just give you the gameplay, basically? And that was it. That was the thing that bothered me with Returns. Like, it was a good game, but it felt like Nintendo was jumping through hoops to try to make you forget Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3 on the Super Nintendo. Just, like, as good as they possibly could. And that left a bad taste in my mouth. Like, that was the thing that I didn't care for. Especially after coming from games like Jungle Beat and all that, where they did away with everything. And then, of course, we had the interviews with, I can't remember his name off the top of my head right at the moment, but the director behind Tropical Freeze, where he was, like, shitting on the Kremlings the whole time in the interview. He's like, oh, do they need to come back? Like, who really cares, It just went back to the fact that it felt like they were trying to basically completely change the whole look of Donkey Kong. And it didn't need to. Like, the games got famous for a reason. They were beloved in the 90s for a reason. You didn't need to change these things. You just did it because you have some, I don't know, vendetta against Rare, I guess, who, was bought out because Nintendo didn't want to pony up the money. Like, it just, got to me. And that's the thing that really holds that game back. Like, that's why, Returns will never quite be as good as it could be from a design standpoint. Now, from a gameplay standpoint, yes, Returns is one of the greatest games in the series. It does the platforming well. The platforming is near perfect, especially with a game that uses motion controls. Which, I mean, we all know how motion control games can get. They get clunky as shit. But Returns was near flawless in that department. Like, they did such a good job. The mechanics were great. They introduced the, hopping into the backgrounds of the stages, which, again, we bring up how dynamic, Donkey Kong has always been with its background and its foreground, and they were literally highlighting that by letting us go into the background of stages, making these worlds feel a lot more bigger and expansive, which is awesome. So yeah, the gameplay was fantastic. But at the end of the day, if you change something too much to where the point of where it's almost unrecognizable, what's the point? Because, like, we're fans for a reason. And so, like, the kids who grew up with that old stuff, like, handing them this game was almost confusing. It's like I'm playing Donkey Kong, but I'm not playing Donkey Kong. Like, where's the zingers? Where's the Kremlings? Where's the claptraps? Where's any of that stuff? It was just all replaced with generic shit. Tiki masks, bats, random skeleton dinosaur bones for some reason. A lot of the enemies and things just felt like they were just plugged in there. Like, just to do it. Like, oh, well, we need an enemy, so we'll just do this shit. Whereas, like, you had 3 games that came previous to this where you had phenomenal designs and phenomenal ideas that you could have just continued that tradition and just made something amazing. So,
all right, I don't want to stop you, but we have stayed on this topic for quite a while. I think we need to switch to the next game.
Yes,
Devin,
we have.
Devin, any last thoughts on? Make them quick.
Well, actually, no. Joe kind of got to what I wanted to get to about the gameplay being, pretty fucking phenomenal overall. I think if the eventual sequel does have K. Rool as a villain, a lot of these problems will be quelled because hindsight's 2020. And assuming there is eventually a sequel and King K. Rool is the villain, I think King K. Rool, whatever. I think this game will be looked back on much more fondly once that barrier, that threshold has been crossed. People can rest easy, and then they can say, okay, yes, this is fine. I can appreciate this for what it is rather than what it isn't.
That is one thing I will agree with. A lot of games get like better as they age. Like Donkey Kong Country 3 was always looked down as like the worst of the series, and now people are like saying this is actually not that bad. And some people are even saying it's the best of the series. So like, age sometimes helps games like these. So.
And secondly, I was not expecting you to get mythological on me, and bonehead Jed slander will not be tolerated in this fucking house.
All right. Now on to Donkey Kong Country 3, represented by Joe. So, Joe, start us off. Okay. Why do you think it is the pinnacle of Donkey Kong Country?
First off, I'll just say that I promise I'm going to not try to take like an hour for this one. Okay, I promise. I'll try.
We're going to try to go a little quicker. I need to eat dinner stuff.
Much appreciated.
Okay.
That's why I made you. That's why I made Devin go first, then it would be the longest.
I think Donkey Kong Country 3 has the potential to be the greatest out of the series because, for one, it was a game that, despite the fact that it had to come out alongside the Nintendo 64, still actually sold really well on the SNES. It gave people a reason to keep their Super Nintendo because literally, it took everything that the original two games did and improved on pretty much almost everything in terms of its platforming and even the partner mechanics, honestly, because the partner mechanics were a little bit more expansive in 3. If you remember, like you could throw Kitty around and do all kinds of stuff that you needed to do. You could do that in 2 too, but there was more like with like pressure pads and stuff like that you had to actually be able to do. Kind of like what Devin was saying earlier. It's like in a way, it feels like a puzzle platformer, sort of. I mean, you had like certain stages that, you know, you had doors that you had to open by throwing one Kong onto it and stuff like that. So it definitely improved on the partner mechanics. It improved on the, you know, the vertical and horizontal platforming. I feel like definitely Donkey Kong Country 3 had the best water stages out of every single game.
Oh, yeah.
And
the music in those water stages, too, both versions were so good.
Oh, for sure. And just generally, like I said, the water stages were the best. I think they had the best mechanics. I think the controls were the best in that game for water stages. It was quick and responsive, and I just, you know, it was the pinnacle of what you could do with aquatic stages for Donkey Kong. And the thing is they are a big part of Donkey Kong. Like, you know, everybody loves them, the water stages, okay? And I feel like they did it really well. I mean, again, you even had Kitty could skip on water if he's like launching and stuff like that over the top. And that was like a really cool mechanic to have to do certain tricks with the platforming that you couldn't do before. So it improved on so much, which is something that I feel like not a lot of people think about when they think about the third game, because they're so hung up on the aesthetic and the music, which, here's the thing. Donkey Kong Country, especially, one of the biggest, most mind-blowing things about the original game was the fact that David Weiss managed to mix in ambient sounds with the music. You heard birds chirping, you heard, you know, the drums in the background, everything you can, in the caves, you could hear like the sounds of water dripping in the background echoing in the cave. It was very cool how he managed to do that on a Super Nintendo sound chip. And Donkey Kong Country 3 does this to an incredible degree, to the point of where even the music in the stages sounds like it's echoing a lot of the time in this huge open space with all these mountains and these trees. Like, seriously, the music is like echoing, which is such a weird thing, but it has that feel to it. And it's just awesome. I think that they managed to pull off the sound in this game better than what a lot of people give them credit for. And the music fits the game style very much, because Donkey Kong Country 3 feels to me like a vacation. Which, in a way, is what it was, because DK and Diddy go on vacation and get captured. So Dixie and Kitty have to go get them. And that's exactly how this game feels. Because the second game, while you were away from the island, it didn't feel good. You know what I mean? Like, you were going there to get your kidnapped friend, and you were going into the belly of the beast. This was the Kremling's literal homeland. It was toxic, it was disgusting, and it was creepy. Whereas this game, you actually feel like this is a place where you could chill. This was like a vacation spot. You had all little cabins with the bears. You had ski lifts. You had mountains and big lakes and pine forests. It felt like it was different from Donkey Kong Country, which they pulled off very well. And it gives you that like weird summer vacation vibe. The music, the atmosphere, everything has that feel to it. It's like a summertime game. Like when I play it, it reminds me of the summertime. Even though there's, you know, snow stages and all that kind of stuff, it still has that summer feel to it. And I think it nails the aesthetic very well. I think everything about Donkey Kong Country 3 from an aesthetic standpoint is very pleasing. I like the way it looks. I like the way it sounds. And I don't think the music gets enough credit. It's more atmospheric, like in the original Donkey Kong Country. Not to say that Donkey Kong Country 2 didn't have atmospheric music, because it certainly did. But this game, I felt like they did more of a similar situation like they did with DK1, where you would go through stages and it felt like, you know, you had like eerie silences where there was no music at all, or there were just little sound effects that would go to like make it a little uneasy or creepy, which I feel like they nailed that really well in 3, like what they did with 1, where you're going through like the caverns and all that kind of stuff, and it was a little like spooky instead of it being, you know, this crazy, ridiculous music. And I feel like Evelyn Fisher did that really well. I think she pulled off the atmosphere super, super well. And then on top of that, you know, the game was bigger. You had so many stages. There was a lot of really good collectibles. The banana birds. You had a reason to go back and play 3 over and over and over again. And again, that isn't to say that the other games didn't do this, but I feel like 3 did it the best because there was just so much to do in it. Like, it literally felt like you were kind of in a sandbox. Like, it had that weird free roam sandbox game feel without being one of those games. You know, again, you could customize your vehicle, let you travel around the map differently. It was just very cool in that way. And I feel like they nailed everything. The overworld map, you know, the aesthetics, and all that shit. Now, one of the big criticisms of DK3 is obviously the Kremlings, King K. Rool. It didn't feel as good as the other ones. Especially the second game, where they have a really constant theme of pirates. But here's my thing with Donkey Kong Country 3, and I honestly think this is the truth. K. Rool is obviously like a Frankenstein-type character. He's clearly a mad scientist. Notice how all the Kremlings in that game are, like, naked. They're all nude, like, they have no clothes, which is different than all the previous games. And they all just look weird. They have, like, big torsos and big arms, and they just look strange. I honestly think that, again, their island sank in the second game. I think King K. Rool was making them. I honestly think that they're supposed to be clones or creations, that he was trying to recreate his species after getting nearly wiped out in the second game. And I think that's why they have such a weird aesthetic. Because that's what they are. They're like Frankenstein Kremlings. Like, he's building them out of nothing. And that's what Chaos was up to up there. He's trying to, like, recreate what he was losing. So, that's my take on the Kremlings in that game. I honestly do think they're supposed to be like genetic experiments or something, and that's why they look so strange. And I think that fits pretty well with what the theme of K. Rool is in that. Again, he's a mad scientist, so, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think 3 did everything that it needed to do, and it did it really well. It's just that Donkey Kong Country 2 was so good that anything that could not top DKC2 in every single way would be looked at as a negative. And I think that 3 had a few misses by comparison, but they were minuscule. And people have, you know, cast this huge shadow over 3 because of it, when really it's not a bad game at all. It's seriously way better than the first one, for sure. It just did everything that the first 2 games did, either at the same level or better. So there you go.
That's a great point. Any like continuations or discussions real quick before we move on to 2? Make sure we can keep times a little consistent.
Yeah. I have a couple. I do. You mentioned the vertical and horizontal platforming. That's cool. You mentioned the mad scientist experimenting on his creations. I think that's definitely what they were going for. I think the game has some pretty cool gimmicks with like the bobsled levels and the low G labyrinth where you're jumping really, really high.
Oh yeah, that's so good.
I do appreciate the mixture of the heavy and lightweight combos. I always appreciated that about the first game. However, the game being more oriented towards puzzles, even in its bosses, it just doesn't feel quite right. It really breaks up the flow every time you're using a fucking animal buddy and you have to run from mice, or turns around, runs from mice, things like that. I don't think it makes for a very appealing game in terms of that. It's very slow to start. I know it gets better towards the back half, but in the first world, you're really only. I do like the lake. I do. I don't think it's the most interesting platforming set of stages. And I think the same applies for the mill. It starts off incredibly slow. And you talked a lot about the enemy variations. I think they're cool. But at the same time, and you mentioned how versatile the Kremling design could be. They got a lot of designs out of them, but I don't think they ever got better than in like the first game and occasionally in the second. You know, you got the buzzsaw bees, but other than that, actually taking a good look at some of these enemies, they're just strange looking things. And I know that's like part of the idea. Yeah, he's experimenting on them, but they also just aren't very appealing. You know, they did certainly take a hit to keep things fresh. Yeah, and I appreciate them being fresh. It's just, I think the enemy design is worse off overall because of it. But yeah, that's about all I got.
Yeah, I just wanted to add real quick. So I grew up with the Game Boy Advance version. So I grew up with the extra levels, and I think those extra levels are super underrated. I think people don't give them the time of day that they deserve. Stormy Seas is a great iteration of the normal lake levels. It's like a lake. It's more of like a boardwalk on like a really stormy setting, and I love that. I love like rain and like storms in video games. Like having a Donkey Kong Country level that's like that is just so cool. And for me at least, just seeing what they did with those levels, like we see like a sunken spruce is like it's a vertical treetop level underwater. That is such a cool idea for a level, and I loved seeing what they did with those levels. And I think if hypothetically there was ever a Donkey Kong Country 4, like one that like is more based off of the original trilogy, I'd want it to be like that, like combining ideas from the levels. Like give us like an underwater factory level, see how that would look. How about a like a forest level combined with like a roller coaster like from 2. It's like I love those. I love combining different ideas to see what works, you know? I think that's what, in my opinion, makes like a cool level. It's like seeing maybe not that makes the most sense, but seeing what would work for that world too. So
I almost feel like those ideas have kind of been done, like, you know, a minecart level that takes place in the forest. It's like the level in Sawmill Thrill and Tropical Freeze.
I was gonna say that level is basically a Donkey Kong Country 3 remake level. It is literally, if that level in the music feels like a Donkey Kong Country 3 level. It is insane.
Or
like
in Underwater Factory, that's kind of like the Juice level.
Oh yeah, I could see that too. Honestly, if for Sawmill Thrill, they just needed to like pop up. They needed to bring it back the bears to that level. You know, have them just hanging out. You know, just vibing in the background. You know,
that would be amusing. Yeah.
But yeah. Well, it seems like we're kind of all curious about that. And then, just by the way, people in the chat, you'll kind of be telling us what you guys think had the most, I guess, correct opinion. Who do you guys agree with the most? We'll kind of tally up the votes there. But now on to Donkey Kong Country 2. This is a game that I love, and it's gonna be hard to really sum up why I love it. But let me start by saying Donkey Kong Country 2 has an underlying theme that I think people sometimes miss, and that is the hero's journey. Donkey Kong Country 2 is the hero's journey, and that you play that through Diddy Kong. Dixie Kong doesn't really have an arc. I mean, she's kind of like just Diddy's girlfriend, which is fine. But like but Diddy, in the sense, is not only trying to rescue Donkey Kong, which I think is super important, but it's also him trying to showcase that he is basically is capable of doing this. You can kind of tell just the fact, like the anxiety, the fact you see, like him and Dixie get absolutely terrified when they see a boss. Like it's just a funny little thing you see, and I think it showcases like just the kind of hint there. And I don't want to, like, this is me reading too much into it, but I love that like the music is progressively kind of like more atmospheric, like in a sense it's playing in the characters' heads. Like it's like the song is music that's a little more tense, and I think that really adds to the gameplay and the atmosphere. That's another big thing about this game too, is atmosphere. Oh, the atmosphere in this game is unreal. Like the forest levels, the bramble levels, like I've mentioned before, Silver Symphony, and how that song really adds to the game, and really adds to those levels. But like, it really does make you feel like you're just in such a strange world, and you're kind of like, you're not in Donkey Kong's island anymore. You're in the Kremling territory. You're in the belly of the beast. And that's such a cool concept. Gameplay is super tight. I love the fact that you can just like pull off moves like it's nothing. I've actually been more of a fast partner. fans. So I always prefer having two fast partners, but one having more like actual like ability to glide, and it's just such a cool way of doing it. And for me, I'm able to pull off more crazy tricks through that rather than just having to have Donkey Kong with me or Kiddy Kong at that point. There's so many like I've gotten really good at the game to the point where like sometimes I just like pull off a move that I probably shouldn't do, but I do anyways because I want to see how it goes. um, but yeah, besides that, I think for me too is just like the game is very intense. I mean, like the music I've mentioned before, but also just like kind of the story itself. Like you're rescuing a kidnapped friend. The man's getting beat up by like King K. Rool. You can see him just getting actually just like bashed by King K. Rool a couple times, like that final boss. He just like hits him with his blunderbuss. Like DK is kind of hurting in that, and it's up to you, Diddy and Dixie, to rescue him. And I mean, like you can kind of tell like the music's like really elevating the fact that its intensity and it gets bigger and better. And I'd argue that like that doesn't really translate the rest of the series. Like 3 was it, but I don't know. Three's dialogue in the what do you call it? Three's dialogue during the final battle kind of like took that
My
out.
wife's gonna kill me.
Yeah, like that just kind of took it out for me, if I'm being completely honest. Like not a bad idea. I think it's funny, but I don't know. It's not my favorite.
That was a little bit of a cheeky British humor for them, because I mean they are British.
Yeah,
so
that
it
is
was a
true.
reference to a British TV show that was like really famous back in the day. It was like a joke.
Yeah. I will say, like that is again like 3 is I love 3. Like I will stand by 3 probably being like my second favorite game in the series, but 2 just for me, its music is the best. Gameplay, in my opinion, is the pinnacle. Though I do agree, like 3 is really good because it focuses more on like that puzzle element too. And then like just the levels. Like I think there's a lot of great levels to be offered there. You got what do you call it? You have like the different forest levels for like that forest interlude plays in. Like I think it's like the rope level where the ropes disappear and come back. You have you've got Animal Antics, which is like kind of a crazy hard level, but like it's really challenging but fun. I will say, in my opinion, it has some kind of weak water levels. I'm not the biggest fan of the ship, like the underwater ship levels. I think it'd been cool if it was like imagine it was like outside the ship and you're like kind of have to go in and out of the shipwreck. I don't know. The fact that like the only two water levels are both enclosed in something just makes me like not as like them besides from other games. But yeah, Donkey Kong Country 2, in my opinion, is the best. But that's not saying much because pretty much all these games we've talked about are really good. Like that's the thing. I'm not trying to tell anyone that like, you know, Donkey Kong Country Returns is bad or whatever. It's like no, we all like all these games. We love these games. We're just kind of trying to figure out the debate. So, but yeah, that's why I love Donkey Kong Country 2. It's a pinnacle of Donkey Kong, in my opinion.
I think that it is the best of the original trilogy for sure. Okay, holy shit! Something just fell outside. I don't know if you guys heard that.
I actually did, yeah.
Wow, that was loud. I really appreciate that they added endgame content. That was much appreciated because in the original DKC is very much a one and done, which to an extent I appreciate just having a game that I can really quickly blast through in like an hour and just be done with it. But that also I feel it kind of drags on just a little bit towards the end, but I still enjoy it. I enjoy the K. Rool refight. I think the bosses have improved from the first game, and I still think they're better than the third game. I definitely just do think it is the best crafted game of the original 3. I'm all right on the pirate theme. I don't think it's the best theme ever, but I'm all right with it. Yeah, I just do think it is superior to the other two. I obviously prefer the mechanics in the Return series of games, but yeah, if I had to pick one from the original 3, it'd be this one. That's all.
I would love to find, for a debate reason, negatives about Donkey Kong Country 2, but I physically cannot say any of them without getting sick. So I won't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like having two speedy characters. I do like having speedy characters. I do just wish that there was a heavy alternative.
Yeah, I suppose that would be the one negative, because you don't, I mean, you have to think how to get past, like, the big boy enemies, like the big tough guys, like the Crusher equivalents and all that, which makes it a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, and there are a couple of levels like Toxic Tower. Toxic Tower is kind of bullshit. Like you're really jumping way up and way down, and you can't see shit the entire time. I
Honestly,
mean, it's a really miserable experience.
if I do have to pick a negative for 2, I really don't like the castle stages towards the end. I don't like them aesthetically. I don't care for the mechanics in them too much. It's too Mario to me. Like the moving floors that are gonna crush you and all that kind of stuff. Like I've seen it 100 times before. When you go into the castles in Super Mario World and all that kind of stuff. It's been done. And it kind of feels like Rare at that point was kind of like, man, we really need to put some last stages in here before you get to K. Rool, so let's just shove these in here for them to do. That's my only criticism. And I mean, even then, I don't really hate them. But I do feel like out of all the stages in the game, they are probably the weakest in terms of everything, almost. Except for, the music, obviously, is obviously good. Crook's March is a great song, but that's pretty much the one flaw, I would say, with 2, is like when you get towards the end, it feels like they were just kind of doing stuff to do it before you finally get to the King K. Rool boss fight.
I kind of feel like as a whole, the game has slightly worse theming than the original, just because it's naturally a more gloomy setting. Again, I'm all right with the pirate stuff. That's fine. But like swamp levels there, aside from the, light peeking through on the trees in some of the spooky ones, but there isn't a whole lot going on back there. It's still it conveys exactly what it wants to, because it's a better looking game, but I do appreciate the art direction and just general look of the stages in the first game better, like in Gorilla Glacier, Krem Croc Industries. The cave stages I could take or leave, but compared to swamps, which are just kind of brownish grayish, and the spooky levels they're cool, but they're still kind of fall into that same general area. I think the honey, the beehive levels are a standout though.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, they are very unique and they're very cool. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that Donkey Kong Country 2 does better than the original game, I think the environments tell a story better, generally. Like, again, we don't really get a lot of background on what the Kremlings, like, what are they up to? Like, what do they do? Like, what's their whole deal? I mean, swamps make sense. They're crocodiles. So, them living in, like, a swamp territory makes a lot of sense. But when you look in the swamp stages and stuff, and you see, like, the oil drums floating around in the background, and the pollution and all this kind of stuff, that's the thing I think DKC2 does really good. I think the environment and the levels tell a story of what King K. Rool and the Kremlings have done to their own homeland. Like, they've just polluted it and diluted it of all, usable resources to build whatever it is that they're building. I mean, the funny thing about it is how you go from, like, the wooden pirate ships, which are all wrecked along the shorelines, to, once you hit the castle, above it is just this giant floating airship. Like, it's almost as if King K. Rool has put all resources into building this giant weapon, this sky ship that's just going to destroy his enemies or whatever he's doing. I don't know. But it looks like he's putting all of this work into these projects for whatever reason. And I think that's funny, like, to see sort of like how the Kremlings have just destroyed their homeland and turned it into a wasteland. And then that's when you go back in hindsight and look at Donkey Kong Country 1, it seems like that's what they're trying to take from the Kongs. Like, their, island that's still good and the resources are there and this untouched nature kind of thing almost. They're trying to spoil it. Like, they've already destroyed their own home. So now they're going to other places because this place is bled dry. Like, there's nothing left that they can do except live in this polluted shithole. And, it's like, you look at the level with the amusement park. It's like King K. Rool is like doing things to try to distract his minions from knowing how much of a shithole they actually live in. It's like, yeah, here's this cool amusement park with all these fun rides and all this shit to do. Like, don't pay any attention to the fact that you're living in a hellhole. Like, it's that I think is really funny, and I think Donkey Kong Country 2 does it really well. Honestly, I think overall, I think if you could sum up what is the theme of the Donkey Kong games generally, I feel like it's a nature versus industry. That's like what it is. It's the destruction of the natural world through just industrial means. Because it's happening in almost every single game. In the first game, you have the oil refineries. You have the pollution to the water and all that stuff. The mine shafts. In the second game, the Kremlings, you have their blasted island that just looks like trash. And then in the third game, you see the sawmills and all the stuff that's going on there. They're cutting down the forest. They're cutting the trees down. Again, you have this whole industry theme. So I feel like that's like a general theme. And it continues on into the Returns games for the most part. Tropical Freeze, I guess not. But they still do have like stages in there that are factories and things like that. Because the snowmats are like building ships and stuff like that. So I guess you could say it's the same thing. But yeah, I mean, I think it does it really well. It really hammers that theme on extremely well.
All right. I think that's a good way to end it. Now we've said our debates. It's up to you guys. Who do you guys think you agree with? Do you agree with Devin with Donkey Kong Country Returns? Do you agree with Joe with Donkey Kong Country 3 / Donkey Kong Country 3 Game Boy Advance version? Or do you agree with me on Donkey Kong Country 2? We're not going to debate anymore because I think that's really going to continue us to go in wee hours in the night. But as a little bonus round.
How many people are watching, by the way?
Like 2. me and Katie.
It's gone up and down.
But, to end off the night, in 1 minute or less, what do you hate about Donkey Kong 64? Go.
Everything.
Oh my goodness.
Except the bosses. Well,
all right, we have one vote for Donkey Kong Country 2, by the way. Poopy Whoopy, who has been patiently sitting in this chat, probably waiting for his shout out. Yes.
He's always there.
Hey, you know what we haven't had? We haven't had the spam bot, remember? we haven't gotten the spam bot.
That's actually partly because of me. I actually made it so that way the chat was more restrictive and the spam wouldn't come up.
Okay, I get that.
Because I mean, I'll be honest. As funny as it is a little tiring to see, Sex Now constantly just spammed into the chat with a bunch of stupid emojis. Talk to hot ladies. Like, all right, we get it.
We don't need to talk to hot ladies. We got Donkey Kong here.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's what you want. But no, I get that. I don't think I'll be completely honest first off, I've never finished Donkey Kong 64. I actually didn't even get past the first world, so I can't judge too much.
Wow.
But I will say, Donkey Kong 64 has the foundations of a really good 3D platformer, but I think it fails on being too complicated with its item management, like the fact that collectibles are like restricted to certain characters. I think it's just really not fun. I think if they were to remake it with like more modern sensibilities, I'd be down for it. But I don't know. It's like for me, it never struck me as that really interesting. The music's never been amazing. I always felt like, I'm gonna be honest here, Grant Kirkhope is like a great composer and I love him. But I'm sorry, he doesn't beat David Wise in terms of Donkey Kong music. again, his stuff from Banjo is completely different, and I agree with him on that. He does great on that, but like, I don't know, man. David Wise's Donkey Kong stuff's better in my opinion. It sounds more like Donkey Kong. So that's just my opinion, at least. But yeah, I don't know. That's how I feel about Donkey Kong 64.
Wow, I
I
can't
think
believe
the bosses have the best part.
I can't believe how anti Donkey Kong 64 this chat is. It disgusts me a little bit. I'll be honest with you. Okay? As someone who grew up playing Donkey Kong 64 and who still plays the game and beats it almost annually. Okay? I 100% Donkey Kong 64 at least once a year. And that's not even a lie. I do
Joe,
it all
invite
the
me
time.
to your
No
house.
wonder you were defending Donkey Kong Country 3. Jesus Christ, you're a madman.
Okay? I have played the game in and out, okay, to nauseum, okay? And yeah, I will admit, it's not the perfect game. Okay, it's got its problems. Okay, Beaver Brothers, okay? The mini games are the worst part. The mini games in the barrels are literally the worst part of the game. That is the part of the game that I despise. It's that part. But they're kind of irrelevant unless you're trying to 100% the game. See, here's the thing. Donkey Kong 64 has become this boogeyman with YouTube because everybody's like, oh, it's got so many collectibles. Oh my god, there's too much. The game just has way too much. Okay, first of all, you don't have to collect every single collectible. Did you have to collect all the moons in Odyssey to get to the end of the game? No. I beat Mario Odyssey by collecting... I mean, yeah, sure, I went back and tried to, complete the game. I failed. I did not complete Mario Odyssey, just to say. But, listen, okay, you didn't need to collect all the moons in Odyssey, and you could beat the game just fine, which I did exactly that. You don't have to collect all the collectibles in Donkey Kong 64. In fact, you don't even have to collect, I think it's more than 20% of the collectibles in that game to get to King K. Rool and beat the game. You don't have to. It's only there for someone who wants to do the full run and do 100% completion. And when you look at games like, for example, Breath of the Wild, okay? There's 99 Korok seeds, okay? No one bitches and complains about that. They're like, oh, Donkey Kong 64. Dude, people talk about Breath of the Wild, okay? It's a masterpiece. It's so good, okay? And I agree, it is a great game. I love it. It's good. I love the Zelda series. I know you guys don't like it that much, but I do. And it's a great game. But that's too much, okay? The Korok seeds are too much. I agree with that. But you're looking at games like that, Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, and nobody bats an eye. But Donkey Kong 64, whoa, too many collectibles. I can't take it. Again, you don't even have to complete, you don't have to collect everything. You don't have to do that. The other mechanic a lot of people like to shit on with 64 is the Kong switching mechanic. Oh, you gotta go back to the barrel to change into this Kong, change into that one. Yeah, I can see that one's a little, it's a little annoying to have to run to the barrels to switch, but you know what? It is what it is. Okay, I mean, they were limited with what they could do. It's a game of the time. They couldn't have all these Kongs running around together on screen and you just being able to swap freely. So it is what it is. Like I said, it's not the perfect game. But I think what it does well enough. They took what was fun with Banjo, they applied it to Donkey Kong, and yeah, they went crazy with the collectibles, and you have to backtrack. But that's another thing, the backtracking. Everybody bitches about backtracking. First of all, the Metroid series, which everybody loves to laud as one of the greatest Nintendo series ever, is fucking full of backtracking. That's all you do in those games. I would know. I've played them all, okay? You go back. You gotta go back to collect your other weapons. You gotta go back to get the expansions on your missiles, on your health. And again, nobody complains. You ever played Metroid Prime games? Because you backtrack a fuck ton in those games. I know, I beat them all. Again, these are the greatest games of all time. Okay, but because Donkey Kong 64 has backtracking in it, well, that's too much. Now, I hate it. Too much backtracking. I feel like people overly hate the game because, again, it's like what Level said earlier. YouTubers like to put up videos with thumbnails. They're like, DK64 is the worst. And they shit on it. And then everybody else is like, oh yeah, that game sucks. I hate it. And they never even played it. That's the thing. It's not the worst game. Is it the greatest game ever made? No. But it's definitely not as bad as people make it sound. They make it sound like it was the absolute worst game Nintendo has ever put out on the N64. And that is just complete bullshit. In fact, it sold really well. Donkey Kong 64 sold gangbusters. Dude, it was... Why do you think so many people want to see a remake of it? If you go on Twitter, anywhere you go where you see Donkey Kong getting discussed, people are like, oh, we want Donkey Kong 64 remake. People love that game. YouTube hates that game. So then everybody else is turning around and being like, I hate Donkey Kong 64. Nah.
That is true though. Like that's how Sonic Adventure really got its absolute hatred. Was like people like it was really loved and people loved it, and then suddenly like YouTubers like, well, actually, it's not that good, and then then freaking Game Grumps and all that people are like, well, actually, the game kind of sucks. Actually, you guys just shouldn't like it, stupid. And then like it became like it was pretty bad. Like I'm kind of elevating the situation a little bit. It was a lot different than that, but just like I feel that, I just think for me at least, I want to see Donkey Kong in 3D again. So I hope that Nintendo isn't like worried about making a new 3D Donkey Kong, but I don't know.
I don't see why they would be. Again, DK64 sold really well. And not only that, but it was critically acclaimed. Like, at the time, they loved it, dude. Everywhere gave it high praise. They were like, oh, this is an incredible game. And there's so much to do. There's so much content to this game.
So much content?
Yeah, content. Exactly. And it's like, nowadays, they've just completely turned on it. Like, oh, it's the worst game they've ever done. It's one of Rare's worst games. Like, no. Far from it, okay?
How about you, Devin? What's your take on Donkey Kong 64?
He doesn't have it.
Sucks.
He's never played it. He's never played it.
I don't have... There comes a point where you don't have to actually play the game. You've just seen enough gameplay. And you can just witness the dumpster fire from a distance. And this is one of those cases. What a foul fucking bloated whale corpse of a game.
Oh, my goodness. This guy.
You have to just go fucking back to these tag barrels just to collect a different colored banana or banana coin to feed these fucking... I don't even know what fetish the hippo and pig are, but there's some deep shit down in one of the Rare employees' minds that made it into those two characters, and I think the world would be better if I just didn't have to think about Donkey Kong 64 as a whole. Cool bosses, though. Mad Jack is awesome.
Alrighty, well...
So much for a minute or less.
Yeah, it was kind of a little longer. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This is fun. We finally did the Donkey Kong stream. It was I don't know how long making this has been, but it's been great to finally get this out to you guys. Any final thoughts?
Well, other than Returns being simply the best, no.
Other than you being simply wrong.
Oh, it almost sounds like Devin wants to go for another 2 hours. That's what it sounds like to me.
Devin, I guess that we'll have to wait for the Donkey Kong stream, the sequel.
Hold on, let me dig
Electric
through my notes real
Boogaloo.
fast.
Electric Boogaloo.
Let me.
What are we gonna do with what would the sequel be?
Where I
Get a
take off my headphones, scream la 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 la, I can't hear you, and you talk about your things, and then I yell louder about mine. And
No, what'll happen? What will happen is I'll go to Joe's house and it'll be a live stream of Donkey Kong 64.
That sounds good.
I'll just show up at Joe's house like, hi. You weren't expecting me, but I'm here anyways.
That sounds fine to me.
For the next one, you guys have to beat Returns on mirror mode. And
You know what honestly would probably be a really fun stream? And it's a shame that we don't all live closer to one another, because what I would love to see is Devin strapped into a chair and forced to play Donkey Kong 64 while we watch and criticize everything that he's doing. That's what I want to see. I just want to.
It's barely possible to hold an N64 controller as is. You think I can do that shit from a chair with my arms strapped down?
I just want to see him squirm while he's playing Donkey Kong 64.
Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
All one of you.
And yeah, thank you for all one or two of you guys for joining.
We already know who it is.
Let's just be honest. Yeah, I was about to say, we all know who it is.
And
There's only
remember,
one person that can put up with their shenanigans every fucking time.
good old Poopy Whoopy.
Mr.
Never
Whoopie.
never rebrand, please. Just stay put Mr. Whoopy.
Or
But-
as I like to call him,
Mr. Poopy.
Mr. Lost to Easy Mario. He knows what he knows what it means.
Wow. Did you lose to an amiibo? Or like its CPU?
No, we played Mario Party one night.
Oh.
And we put Mario and Wario. We put Wario on Master. And we put Mario on Easy. And he lost.
to Easy Mario.
He got challenged by Easy Mario in a one-on-one towards the end of the game. And Easy Mario beat him. He's losing it right now in the chat, dude.
YouTube, ban that guy.
I told
Get
him
outta
I would
here.
never let him live it down.
Hey, if it makes you feel better, Joe lost to Mia's Rosalina a couple times, and he doesn't want to admit it.
I don't know what you're talking about. That never happened.
No, you're lying. I beat you. I beat
Dude,
you as Rosalina.
There's no evidence for this. What do you mean?
Hey, at least then we got beat by Birdo like a round after though, so we don't have to feel as bad.
Yeah.
The only true winner here is me because the only way to win Mario Party is by not playing.
Ah, jeez, this guy. Devin's refusal to just play games.
That's sad.
Unreal, dude. Doesn't play Mario Party.
My
Doesn't play Donkey Kong
stingy ass.
64.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I
Sad.
couldn't play Donkey Kong 64.
But
if I wanted to, unless I
he
was
chooses to
anyway.
play. He chooses to play Donkey Kong Country Returns,
Bet you sorry ass I know.
the lowest tier Donkey Kong game out of the entire series. That's crazy.
I'm
All
gonna
right.
grab you through this call and just strangle you like Homer strangling Bart.
All right. Well, you guys have a good night, and remember, Banana Slamma.
Oh my! Start
Start
singing Coconut Cream Pies as I shut off this live stream.
Just gotta go. We gotta start singing some Donkey Kong country music. You know, like I don't know what's happening to me. I hear all the blame for things I didn't do. I mean, no one else knows that song. It's
This
the
is when the
greatest.
credits start to roll right
Almost
here.
heaven, West Virginia.
Donkey Kong
Nobody's
76.
Hero. On absolute zero.
Oh, boy.
Ba-dun-dun-dun-dun.
Country road.
And-
it's taking home.
And
It's
that
me,
It's just like stop the stream.
and that's the end. The stream is stopping right now. That's it. We've
Kill it off.
gotten to that point.